Good morning. Welcome to our information sharing meeting for October 24th, 2023. We'll start with introductions in the room. I'm Pat Malone, Commissioner.
Good morning, Zano Giroux, Commissioner.
Nancy Wise, Commissioner.
Vance Crony, County Council.
Rachel McEnany, County Administrator.
In the room,
Rick Griffin, Chief Financial Officer.
Luke Glaze, Executive Director of Salem for Refugees.
Chris McQueen, Office Director of Corvallis for Refugees.
Chris Campbell, CHC Director of Operations.
Lacey Molell, CHC Executive Director. April Holland, Interim Health Department Director. Amanda Makepeace, BOC Staff.
Corey Rogan, Benton County Public Education.
Erica Milo, Board Recorder.
all right, and those joining us online.
Jeff Van Arsdal, Benton County Sheriff.
Tommy Douglas, Nate, Natural Areas Parks and Events.
Mary Lee Hopner, Budget Analyst.
All right.
Ken Eklund, Chair of DSAC.
All right. Next up is announcements. Do we have any announcements this morning? We never have any announcements. Are there any additions or corrections to our agenda? Consider the agenda approved as stated here. Any comments from the public this morning? All right, hearing none, we'll get into our work session. First up, Corvallis refugees, but you're out of Salem, is that correct? Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I see a red light here. Does that work?
Yep. Red light up by the neck.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Luke Glaze. I'm the Executive Director of both Salem and Corvallis for Refugees. That's where the confusion there is with the two cities. So today we'd just love to present to you a little bit about expanding, opening an office here in Corvallis. And so to start out with, sorry. No problem. No problem. So I'll go ahead and just start by giving a brief overview of kind of who refugees are and how that connects with our offices and the clients we serve. If we can, got some slides here. Definitely have time for questions at the end, but also if there's at any point questions during our presentation, feel free to stop us as well. Yep. All right. So just to start by defining a refugee is anyone who has been forced to flee his or her country due to war, persecution, or violence. Currently in the world, there are 110 million displaced people, out of which 26 million hold that special refugee status, meaning they've actually not only been displaced from their maybe hometown, but they've also had to flee that border and be welcomed into another country in which they can be vetted as a refugee. Also important to note that out of this kind of global crisis, roughly 50% of these individuals are under the age of 18. So it's a crisis that disproportionately impacts children. And also that represents the clients we serve both in Salem and Corvallis as well, being majority children. With resettlement globally, there's a few different strategies or options when we look at a refugee individual. The first is voluntary repatriation, the idea that most folks would love to go back to their own country. They would love for the war to end. They would love for safety and security. And so that's always the number one preferred option when we're looking at refugees globally. The next option is local integration. My wife and I actually lived in Jordan in the Middle East for quite some time. And Jordan as a country, both is a receiving country for refugees, both from Iraq, Palestine, and Syria. But also there was options, especially for Palestinian refugees in the 60s and 70s, to actually gain citizenship in the country of Jordan. And now that is their new home country. So that's one option, would be local integration into the country that's hosting you. And then finally is this option that we're dealing with today, which is the idea of resettlement. Refugees having an option to come to a country, often countries like United States, Canada, Australia, many European countries have resettlement programs. But I think it's important to note that less than 1% of the global refugees actually have this option of resettlement. So by the time a refugee lands here in Oregon, it is kind of very lucky for them in that sense that they have this option available to them. Historically, in the United States, this has been a very bipartisan and supported effort with not a lot of swing in arrivals between different administrations. And the historic average has been around 65,000 to 70,000 refugees annually. As you can see, I've outlined a few of our more recent years, and you can see there's been a lot more volatility. Some of that due to COVID and the impacts on the refugee program. But this has led to some kind of major impacts to the resettlement network in the United States, as with low arrivals, many offices actually closed. And so now with higher number of arrivals, again, offices are trying to rebuild. And that in some ways is what resulted in Salem for Refugees becoming a resettlement agency just 2.5 years ago, and now with the expansion to the office here in Corvallis. We are one of 6 resettlement agencies now in the state of Oregon. Historically, resettlement has always taken place in the Portland metro area. Salem for Refugees was the first non-Portland agency. And then this year, opening up our Corvallis office, as well as Catholic Community Services of Lane County, opening in Eugene for the first year in 2024. Oregon, on average, sees about 1,200 refugee arrivals, and we currently are receiving about 1/4 of those arrivals as an organization. At Corvallis and Salem for Refugees, our mission is to see people and resources brought together to empower refugees to thrive. We do this through a large network of volunteers who engage with our organization. And our goal is not just see refugees surviving in our cities, but we really want to see them as seen as valued, contributing members of our society. And that idea of thriving, we're just starting to see it as we've been resettling now for a few years, as refugees are opening businesses, engaged with our community partners, serving in leadership. And thankfully, we're even in a state that has refugees who are even serving in our legislative branches. Lastly, I'll just comment before passing it over to Chris, our office director here in Corvallis. I'll just mention a few of our distinctives. So the first is the idea of mutually transformative relationships. This is the idea that although we have a lot to give to refugees as they resettle in our communities, there's also so much that the community and volunteers and staff can receive back from our families. As I mentioned, they come with refugees with the highest rates of entrepreneurism in the United States. There's a lot we can learn from that, just work ethic and passion about making a new life here. So much that they can share with their culture, their food, hospitality. And so we take that posture. Secondly is empowerment. This is the idea that it's often easier to do something for someone It's a lot harder to actually work on empowering someone. And so with our volunteers and staff, we really work to make sure we're providing them with the tools. Quick example of that is it's a lot easier to take a refugee family to their doctor's appointment. It's a lot harder to drive to their house, get on a bus, ride the bus with them to their doctor's appointment and ride back. And those are the kinds of services that we provide to make sure families feel empowered to get around in their new community. And then lastly is the idea of people of faith and people of goodwill. This is the idea is that as an organization, although we started with a very strong contingent from the faith community in Salem, this effort has always included the entire community. And as an organization, we stand on that principle. Our board leadership, our staff, our volunteers represent the entire community that we live in and serve, as well as often faith communities of the refugee populations are also involved in the work we do. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Chris McQueen. Chris is our office director for Corvallis.
Thanks. That's so good to be with you this morning. So yeah, my name is Chris McQueen. I'm the office director for Corvallis for Refugees. I've just been living in the community for about 1.5 years, came from Turkey, was a part of a refugee resettlement organization there for a decade. So I've kind of seen both sides of this, and there's ways to do refugee resettlement well. And there's another way to just make it about efficiency and checking off the government compliance checklist. But when you get a whole community involved in refugee resettlement, it's a different way of doing resettlement. So one of the things I'm so excited about is how the community here in Corvallis has already come alongside of our program, even though we're so young. We've had about 5 families resettled here so far since March. So 2 families from Afghanistan, a family from Sudan, 2 families from Syria, and then now actually, so 6. We just had a family from El Salvador arrive a couple of weeks ago. So we're on track to receive about a family a month. And that's our trajectory. We're really excited about that. I'm going to go through a few more details about our local program, and then I'm going to share a story about a family just to give you an idea of how refugee resettlement works in a community. This is our new office down on Walnut. Pretty bare bones right now, but we're excited about it. And some of our staff. So we have 4 full-time staff members and a part-time staff member. Yeah, obviously Corvallis was a great choice for the next office for refugee resettlement for so many reasons. Obviously OSU is a big one. We don't have enough real contacts in the university right now for partnerships. So that's one of the things we're hoping for, are introductions to different folks at the university. But just thinking about the diversity that a university already brings to a city, I don't need to tell you all this, you know, even thinking about the international student population and the opportunity for interpretive services for refugees that come. Free public transportation is a huge benefit. We're very grateful for that. Yeah, and I won't get too deep into the weeds in some of our services, but a couple of the things that where we involve community members to be a part of what we're doing that is a little non-traditional. Not every refugee resettlement does it this way, but we have what we call good neighbor teams. It's a group of 5 to 10 people that would come alongside a family from the time they arrive at the airport and walk with them for about a year, having a once-a-week touch base with the family. It doesn't need to be a big event, but it's just kind of checking in on the family so that they have this relational part of what they need to bounce back from trauma in community. So it's not just about providing for their core needs. It's about this relational aspect that the community can offer. So we've seen just a great turnout for our good neighbor teams. We're very excited about that. We also have what we call resource teams. These are up on the screen there, you'll see. These are all the different areas that maybe a refugee would need to integrate well into a new community. So our teams are made up of a team leader and then different community members who would volunteer to be on that specific team. So let's just say with English, we have some different community partners and individuals. Maybe they would provide English tutoring in the homes, but Like, for example, Corvallis Multicultural Literacy Center has been one of our, really wonderful partner for us. They've adapted to different new neighbors that have arrived and even opened some classes in the evenings for when our new neighbors receive employments. And they're so sad that they no longer have English classes. So yeah, just great to have a community partner like that. But as you can see, wellness, legal, healthcare, housing, our welcome home team, employment, education, and transportation are our resource teams that really the community makes that happen. So we're very excited to find new community partners and anyone we're not connected to yet who, if you think of folks we still need to be connecting with, whether that's the county or other community-based organizations, we'd love those introductions. Well, I'm going to share a little bit first about the story of a young man named Najim and his family. Najim arrived in July, and he's 28 years old. He came with a family, his parents, and then his 3 younger siblings. And it's been really fun to watch this family receive wraparound services from the whole community. So partners, government agencies, individuals, it's been great. So Najim is from Darfur. They love and they miss their country, but they experienced regular death threats and violence as the conflict there worsened. And just a few weeks ago at Good Samaritan, a doctor removed a bullet from Najim's father's arm. He said that after over a decade of living with the bullet in his arm, he feels like a new person with the bullet removed. His father started work at the Hilton Hotel last week, and for the first time in a very long time, he's enjoying the full range of motion of his arm. He's very excited about that. When Najim's family fled from Sudan in 2008, they thought they'd just be staying for a short time in the Mile refugee camp in Chad. However, they stayed there until July of 2023 when they came to Corvallis. And 3 of the children in the family were born in the camp, and that's the only life they've ever known. The whole family worked hard to grow food outside the camp to support their family and others around them. Even though they had very little, they wanted to help others. Najim's father, Sharif, was giving his time to teach Arabic language to the children through the Jesuit mission there in the refugee camp. So he taught them how to read and write Arabic so that they could have a future. Najim himself recognized that the youth had nothing to do, so he organized a football club and they organized tournaments and things like that. So it was just great. Even they're thinking outside of themselves. And then when they arrived here in Corvallis, they also had this heart to help others. So Najim really wants to be a doctor. So that's what he's been talking about for a long time, is how can I be a doctor? And we had a community member, a volunteer, who recognized that need in him. And I got him plugged in with Lynn Benton Community College's Bridge program, where he starts with English. And then later on, as he gets some proficiency, he can switch over to take normal community college classes. And this particular volunteer is going to walk with him through his process, trying to get him set up with to achieve his career and educational goals. Yeah, so Najim's family, they're in such a healthy place. The kids are so alive. The family's received love and care from so many volunteers in our community. This family has shown such resiliency in only a few months of living in Corvallis, and a number of community members have surrounded this family as their good neighbor team. Some have served as English tutors. Some have helped them navigate the healthcare system. Some were involved in the kids' summer school program to help them prep for this school year. Some helped with employment. 2 community members generously offered their rental home to this family at a discounted rate. A volunteer with the Bicycle Collective outfitted the family with bicycles, and they ride them every day. Other groups that have made an impact on this family are ODHS. They've been wonderful, really, really supportive and generous towards our families. WorkSource, CMLC, Sarah Devine and Marcian Rivera Cucci have really led the charge with the school district, and they've been great. I mean, just getting our families plugged into all the services that the school districts offer. We've had cultural orientations offered by the police department to help the families. We have about 10 cultural orientations as families arrive to kind of get acclimated to life here and understand how things work. let's see, Altrusa, Vina Moses, Operation School Bell, Dial-A-Bus, Furniture Share, Samaritan Health, and IHN. Johnson Family Dental has helped the children, and then the Benton Community Health Center's dental clinic has really helped the adults. So we, these are just a few of the partners, but you are probably aware of all these groups, but there's probably more out there. And we're just so grateful that this is a community effort. This isn't just one organization doing something, but we look at the health of the families, and it seems like they're all doing so well, because it's not just the services that are offered, it's the way that they're offered. So it's these community members that show up with love, they show up with a whole heart, kind of encouraging, coaching the families along the way. It's been very exciting. So I just want to highlight a couple of our greatest challenges: housing and employment. So obviously housing, you all know that that's a challenge here in Corvallis. We're looking for more opportunities with compassionate landlords and property managers, different groups that could potentially partner with us, who'd be willing to kind of get through some of the red tape. Bigger property managers might require certain things that our new neighbors can't really provide. So whether that's, they have been vetted by the State Department, but they, nothing shows up on a background check. They don't have a credit score. They don't have employment the first day they arrived. And so, trying to apply for housing when they have no record, it's a little bit challenging. So so far we're just working with individuals who we can explain this to, but we're really looking for property managers or other creative opportunities through the state or the county, possibly for housing. So that's one way we'd love some kind of partnership or discussion about guidance on who we should be talking to. Employment is another, it's the same sort of challenges, whether it's a language barrier or you can't prove your work history, or all of our new neighbors show up, though they've already applied for Social Security cards and numbers from across overseas. So they arrive and they get their work ready within the first week of arrival. So it's just a matter of introducing them to the right groups that could employ them. So those are our main challenges. We have others. We're also would love to have any kind of conversation about funding and partnership with, whether it's grant writing or just understanding what kinds of resources are available here, whether it's from the county or other. But thank you so much for spending the time with us this morning. And if you have any questions, we'd love to interact with you all.
You say that you've been receiving a family a month so far. How do they choose Corvallis? What's the selection mechanism, or is there one?
Yeah, so both Salem and Corvallis for Refugees is under a national resettlement agency. We have a contract with them, and that's World Relief for us. There's 10 of those nationally. And so the 10 agencies kind of divvy up the refugee arrivals for that week. And then ultimately we'll then push those down to all of their offices and affiliates. And so they look at our language capacity, they look at maybe housing resources, but ultimately, it's kind of our agency that places them with us. Because Corvallis and Salem don't have a history of resettlement, we don't have what's called U.S. tie cases very frequently. Those would be refugee cases that have a family member already living in the United States. Some places like Seattle, our World Relief offices in Seattle, they almost entirely get U.S. tie cases because there's such large refugee populations that have lived in Seattle for many decades. So for us, it's all free cases. So they have no relationships in the United States. They literally say, wherever you put me, we will resettle. And then that gets placed in our office.
And are there people here in the community that serve on more than one resource team, or do they work just with one family typically?
So the Good Neighbor teams would typically work with a family. So it's just this group of 5 to 10 people where they have this relationship for that year. And then the folks on the resource team, that's kind of their main thing. So they serve every family that comes through.
Thank you for that. Just trying to get a sense for the scope of the volunteer need across all of the families and how that will roll out moving forward.
That was, I was curious of the mechanics of just how people end up in Oregon. So that was helpful. So the national organization contacts you and say, like you said, one a month, so on average, so that is there some negotiation of we've got someone with very limited language skills. Can you handle that, or just
Yeah, not a lot of wiggle room there, just because it is so complex and how they have to divvy families out between all the offices. But for example, like in our Salem office, we don't have a lot of pediatric specialties. And so if there's a case with a child with complex medical issues, we will sometimes, depending on the issue, will request that that case be transferred to a city that's closer to a pediatric hospital. But maybe other sites, I know housing is very expensive in Corvallis, but maybe some sites would say a certain size of family, hey, we can only take a few of those a year because we just don't have that type of housing resource available to us. So there is some negotiation there. And then annually we set our capacity. So we tell the federal government, here's how many refugees we can serve this year. And then currently those would all come through kind of our umbrella, Salem for Refugees. And then we're deciding, Chris and I, which families make sense to come to Corvallis and which families to Salem. We know that Corvallis right now, we're prioritizing cases, Arabic speaking cases, Dari, Pashto, and Spanish. So those are kind of our 4 target language groups that we're working on now, where in Salem, I think this last year we had 13 or 14 different language groups we were working with.
And do you have a partner organization in Portland, or you're standalone?
Yeah, we're standalone for Oregon as a World Relief site. And then because we're not World Relief Salem or World Relief Corvallis, we actually have our own organization, our own 501c3, our own board of directors. And as we open the office here in Corvallis, we've also invited 2 board members representing the Corvallis community to sit on that board. So there's always that leadership. So.
Any last question? I noticed on a slide your Corvallis office is 3460, but a little more detail. What part of town is that?
Sure. Yeah, that's Walnut Boulevard. So down past the Timber Hill Shopping Center, and I guess next to, is it Bessie Coleman School? Is that the one that's down there? Sorry, I should know that. Yeah, thank you.
They changed the name for
Yes, that's right.
recently. So great. Well, appreciate the information and your efforts. I mean, you hear on the news a lot about more and more refugees and unnecessary wars and people having to leave their homes and so it's nice to know we have a local resource.
Yeah. And we want to thank you for taking the time with us as well. And if you all, I'm available if anybody ever wants to have a cup of coffee or come to our office, or if there's others listening who feel like this could be a good place to connect in or have some ideas for us. We're very open in our development phase here for partnership. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, update from Oregon Cascades West Council of Government. Ryan Vogt and Meg Walker. Why don't you come up to the, oh, Meg, come on.
Well, good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
Welcome aboard, Rachel.
Thank you.
For the record, Ryan Vogt. I'm the Executive Director for Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments. It's great to see you all this morning, perhaps the last dry morning of the year. I'm not a meteorologist, but I think you only have to be 50% right or something like that to successfully navigate that career. Okay, we provided information to you in a packet ahead of time. I don't intend to kind of regurgitate all of that, but I am open for questions on that. And you were extremely generous with your agenda time. If you really want me here for 30 minutes, it's going to feel a lot like a filibuster, but we can do it. Otherwise, I have a couple of bullet points I'd like to cover with you that I think are pertinent since the last time we were here. The first is I'm extremely excited to announce the new building in Corvallis is open. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at it yet? Nope, not yet.
Only from the outside.
Only from the outside. Well, it is still under construction and a little bit of modifications and what have you. So it's kind of a soft open. We'll be looking for a ribbon cutting ceremony here once we kind of get ourselves situated. But if you get the opportunity to swing by, we are on 1121 Northwest 9th. We are in the same parking lot as Sherry's. And the building looks fabulous. And with the soft open, we are seeing a lot of veterans right now. And I'm so excited that our last location was really not amenable to seeing veterans, particularly veterans who had mobility challenges. And so being in a place where it's handy, you know, it's wheelchair accessible, or people with crutches or other mobility concerns, it's been a long time coming for that. And of course, the organization's been around for just over 50 years in one way, sense, shape, or form. And this is the first time we've had a permanent structure in Benton County, which is pretty exciting for me. So we do have Veteran Services. We're the first people to occupy the building, and we are rotating through reception, but Veteran Services is there seeing consumers all the time. We also have the Corvallis Area Metropolitan Planning Organization is moving into the building as well. And then I know as commissioners, you all are acutely aware of the relationship that we have with Community Services Consortium and the ongoing growth of partnership between the two of us. And we now have a final footprint of the building that has all of Community Services Consortium's Benton County work moving into the building. So they're going to occupy 50% or right about 50% of the building. And they plan to be moved in by January 1. So we're working out the lease details, and we figured out who's sitting in what part of the building and all of that stuff. So it's very exciting. Let's see here.
Ryan, on Campo, who will be the staff members who will be in the Corvallis office?
So I want
names.
So Quorum will be moving into the office, and Nick will be there, you know, kind of back and forth. And we also have a dedicated conference room that we'll be using for Campo meetings.
Great.
One of the things that seems like it's a little bit smaller in the grand scheme of things, however, I know this has been a long time coming, is that we received a $1.2 million grant in the carbon reduction area to finally finish the design plans and make shovel ready this pathway, multi-use pathway between Corvallis and Albany. And I know that in the context of other things that are on here, that doesn't seem like it's the biggest mover and shaker. But I reflect back on the notion that when I came into this job 3.5 years ago, this multi-use path was one of the very first conversations I had with Commissioner Malone. And it was clear that that conversation had been going on for a number of years before we had that conversation. And so this is a long-term victory coming here. So it's pretty exciting.
And that money is to get to a 30% design phase for the middle section.
Yeah.
I think we're supposed to have actual pavement on the Corvallis side of things next year, and scheduled for 2025 for the North Albany end. But to have a path, you have to be continuous, and there was a kind of a large gap in the middle that this grant from ODOT fills.
Yeah. So
It's exciting. Inch closer.
Just a little bit closer. And then I also wanted to highlight where we are in the broadband conversation. So the Council of Governments has been assisting in leading the phase 1 conversations around broadband, and that included the area mapping and design with contractor Celerity. Those maps are complete. The address challenges have been done successfully. Cascades West Cog and Lane Council of Governments made numerous challenges and brought quite a bit more money into the state because those challenges were accepted. Fortunately for the Lynn, Benton, Lincoln area, Benton County is not demonstrating the same level of need as Lincoln and Lynn counties, but they're still showing just over 1,700 locations that are non-served or underserved locations. Now, here's the import that I'm trying to stress for the broadband conversation. The state has a lot of money coming in, a lot in terms of numbers most of us can't really fathom on our daily lives, but not enough to actually satiate the entire Oregon with effective broadband. The money that's coming in, as I understand it, does not have a needs-based allocation formula. So that mapping got us to a place of saying, this is how much money Oregon should get. The mapping did not get us to a place of saying Benton County has 1,750 people who are unserved, therefore they get X amount of money. So what we've done is we've created the maps that create the baseline of money that goes to the Oregon Broadband Office. And now we start a new round of essentially competitive asks, working with internet service providers and ourselves to chase grants and money to make projects successful. So why that's important to you? It's important to you because as we move into phase 2 here, we have extended our contract with Celerity a little bit to assist in standing up individual county task forces. To this point, we've just had a multi-county broadband action team, which has been great to get us where we are now. But now we have to move into a place of really local advocacy in order to pencil out projects and bring broadband to your community. So over the course of the next couple of months, there will be some work being done to stand up and activate really committed task forces. Those task forces then are going to be really responsible for engaging internet service providers and trying to put together projects that will pencil and then applying for those projects. Most of those projects, the internet service providers bring money to the table as well, which makes it easier. But I just kind of want to put that on your radar because that will be an intentional ask coming up that that we make sure that we've got people from Benton County actually seating on these task forces and helping.
Thank you. Appreciate that update. I don't know, we have an update coming up from our IT director, Adam Lortz, as well on this topic. I think he's planning to go further into the feasibility study and describe what's going on. So it's a little confusing sometimes between the Council of Governments role and the broadband action team's role and all the many players, but I'm eager to fill the gaps. And also to, there are a lot of places where we have service, but we certainly don't have service at the new minimum speed designation everywhere. Right. And I think that that's going to be the harder thing to fill because the competitive dollars are likely to go to fill the gaps. So I'm still interested in trying to boost those speeds.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, probably a point of clarification that might help with that. Where does everybody fit in? Is the Council of Governments was asked to step in to administer that first phase grant. There was some trickiness to it at the beginning, and so we have done that. But the broadband action teams are really being organized by a different entity, and we will play a role at the table for the task forces, but we've not yet been asked to do anything in the way of leadership around ongoing work in broadband.
Thank you. That helps.
Yep. And I've got all kinds of bullet points, but that feels about enough. So do you have any questions for me?
Well, I appreciate the update on the broadband effort. What's the dollar amount coming into the state? It's a large number.
I don't know off the top of my head.
And that was at least a year ago, and you know things are happening, but sometimes getting down to the specifics is really helpful. And what can we do here to advance the effort in Benton County and pay attention to the other two counties that the COG serves and CSE serves. You did mention the other two counties at least once, but it's Lynn, Benton, Lincoln, and both agencies serve the same territory, which is helpful when you talk about combining efforts. And I read the report fairly carefully. I did not see any mention of the friendly octopus that COG resembles, but there are part of the reason you got 30 minutes was just all the different areas that the COG is involved with, and it's extensive, as you probably know.
I'm familiar with it, but I'm uncovering probably new pieces still every now and again. And I am still serving as the interim community and economic development director. So if you know anybody who knows anybody.
I was just going to ask you to make a pitch. I know you like wearing many hats, but that is a real need, because a little like the broadband effort, that there's a lot going on, and if we don't have a full-time person leading that effort, we're missing out. I mean, no matter how hard you try. So the COG is actively recruiting at this point.
Actively recruiting. Yep.
Again.
We're getting some very interesting candidates. We're still open, so it's too early for me to be able to comment on how successful this particular recruitment is going to be. But I'm excited that there are people in the community who want to step up and do a different role. And I'm also excited there are people outside of the community who are really interested in coming and serving here.
Okay, and what's the closing date on this round?
It's open until filled, but at the end of the month, I will do a more thorough review of the resumes.
At the end of October.
End of October.
Okay.
So next week.
Does that position oversee all of the loan portfolio that you have for small businesses?
It oversees the loan portfolio. Well, it oversees the lending program. We have somebody who, a senior loan officer who really does the daily work of it. Oversees the two metropolitan planning organizations, the Area Commission on Transportation Options, broadband, rural outreach, the Ride Line brokerage.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a bit going on. It's half of Commissioner Malone's octopus for sure.
And another question there. how is the uptake of the lending capacity you have? Has your marketing been effective, or I'm just curious about that.
So in the last several months, we've been able to issue 3 small business loans, which is more than we did throughout the entirety of COVID. So I would say we are in a good uptick. We have 6 prospects in the pipeline right now. It's kind of an exciting time in small business lending. The most recent loan that we closed was for a Corvallis lock shop that purchased the Albany lock shop to expand their business.
Great. I have a couple other questions and just one comment. When you do have your launch of the Corvallis office, consider inviting the Corvallis Chamber of Commerce greeters to do that, because they will bring lots of people, and there's a great networking percolation effect in terms of awareness when the greeters are involved. So the other question I had was with respect to the senior disability and services broadly. I'm glad to hear about the behavioral health activation intervention training that you're doing. That sounds great. And I was wondering, in terms of the senior services, what we have in front of us in our packet is the data about formal complaints. But how many people do COG staff touch through the senior and disability services? Because I know that complaints are just one small fraction of the portfolio of work.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. You are correct that the complaints is really about adult protective services, and that doesn't adequately talk about the size of the number of consumers that we reach through case management and what have you. This has been an ongoing pain point for me to try and cull that data out from the state, to be able to, especially when I do the annual reports, to talk about how many seniors and people with disabilities are receiving services in your area. And I still don't have it. So I can get a relatively close number over to you just based on caseload size and number of workers. It doesn't tell the story, though, of how many people are we serving in adult foster care, how many people are we receiving in, licensed nursing facilities, and case management services or money management services. So that's still a work in progress, but I will get a number over to you that at least starts to give you a sense of how big the breadbox.
Thank you. That would be really helpful. And so the reason for that is that all of the databases that the staff are working in are state databases, and all the numbers go in but don't come out. Is that the issue?
That's part of the issue. Yeah, there's ownership conversations, and then it seems like there's always a new database that's just about a year away, and so nobody ever wants to do anything new in the database that's still existing. And then trying to do a zip code sort or if the consumer began in Corvallis, but they're in foster home in Lebanon, how do you want that report? So
yeah, okay. I've just been very curious about this program for years, and it's very hard for me to wrap my arms around it. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, glad to hear about the Corvallis office. I have been in the old office, and it was just one kind of medium-sized room. Were there any separate offices?
At the old office or the new office?
Old office.
The old office was kind of a cubicle area of, it was kind of a larger room with cubicles, and then there was a side area that also had a conference room and a side office.
Okay, but it just seems for the veteran services, in addition to being more, the new office being more accessible, you also might have a better chance of private conversations that I can see need for a separate space.
Each of our veteran services officers has their own office. And so they have room to have closed door private conversations with the consumer that's coming in. And then, of course, we also have separate interview space if for some reason they need a larger conference room or a larger space to have that conversation.
Great. And the other thing I'd like to point out is the $0.4 million grant for the mobility hub, which will help with transit. So a hub at LBCC and another one at OSU and as I recall, that was a ODOT grant and this project scored at the top. And so I think the team should be congratulated for getting the project preliminary design and then getting the money to, this is enough funding to complete both hubs. Is that correct?
That's correct. With it gets it across the finish line. I think that there has been some additional money put in. But yes, it really is exciting. And I know we've discussed it here before and it's still a year in the making. So we'll discuss progress as we go, but this will connect multiple transit to a single place so people can move between buses. It'll be a place where people can safely lock up their bikes. There's a possibility that there may be rental bikes there or even the rental scooters there. People can grab Ubers there. So, and then of course, it's situated right on the campuses, which is wonderful too.
Well, and I've seen some of the drawings and it's not just a fancy word for a title for a bus stop. I mean, it really, there was talk in the future of plugins for electric vehicles and there are bathrooms as part of the project at this point.
I believe there were, but I can't be positive on that.
Seemed like
Seems like
there was discussion and it raised the cost and I've lost track if they're still part of the current design, but that is exciting to another piece of helping people get around our area because I know the LB loop will stop there and there'll be several options for catching buses as I recall. So great. Any other questions for Ryan? Okay, well, thank you and looking forward to celebration at the opening of the Corvallis Center there.
Excellent. Thank you, commissioners.
Next up, Small Farms Program Update, Carolyn Ashton, Laurel Sherman, and Tegan Moran.
Good morning, Commissioners, County Administrator, and Council. I'm Carolyn Ashton. I'm the local liaison for OSU Extension Service in Benton County. I also have a 4-H faculty hat. I only have 1 minute. We pieced this out, so I would take just a very short moment to let you know we're very excited to have some new faculty in Laurel Sherman join us, who took the place of Brad Withrow Robinson, who retired. And so we're really excited that Laurel's with us, and also Tegan Moran, who is our small farms, one of our small farms faculty. And she's going to be giving a presentation today on behalf of her team. I also wanted you to know, just very quickly, that we had a very positive funding outcome for Oregon's overall extension and engagement budget, a very positive 2023 legislative session. And one of the things that is coming out of that, and I know this will be of particular interest to Commissioner Malone, is that we are planning on hiring a statewide extension Christmas tree specialist. Thank you. And so that's on the top of the list that got sent out by our director. One of the other things is that we're hiring, we have someone on board to join us for Master Gardener Coordinator to share in Lynn and Benton counties. So we're very excited about that. I think that's my 1 minute. And now I'm going to turn it over to Laurel.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm super excited to be here. I am the extension forester for Benton County, but also for Polk and Lynn County. I did my master's at Oregon State University in Forest Ecosystems and Society. And after that, I was working with the Forest Service in Oregon, actually over in the Deschutes National Forest, but I've been around Oregon for a while. But I did grow up in the forests of southwestern Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and have also studied forestry in Wyoming and Montana. So I think that gives me a unique perspective of what's going on nationally and being able to bring that into Benton County small landowners. My passion is science communication, which is perfect for this position because I'm looking to bridge the gap between research going on at Oregon State and other academic entities and bringing it to private landowners and small woodlands groups so that they can actually utilize that on their landscape. So I'm looking forward to the shift from the Forest Service to actually getting on the ground and working with private landowners and making things happen for them. So I'm really excited to be here. Some of the things I'm working on right now are connecting with, so my predecessor, Brad, built a lovely community. He was very involved. And so I'm trying to get out there and meet all these folks, foster connections with people, including the Benton County Small Woodlands Association, get familiar with the Oregon Department of Forestry folks in our county, Fish and Wildlife folks, and try to get people on board with the new private forest accord. I'm not sure if folks have heard about that. Decoding the rules, the very complicated rules of the private forest accord and holding workshops for private landowners is in my future. I am also working on a Foraging Your Woodland program for private landowners because I have been a long time forager since childhood growing up in Appalachia. So looking to add some fun workshops for people to build connection with their land in other ways.
Thank you, Laurel. We're very excited to have Laurel. Oh, there we go. Are we good? Yeah, we're very excited to have Laurel, and my name's Tegan Moran, and I am with the Small Farms Program. And sitting next to Laurel, I have to say that what's beautiful about our work is that we don't operate in silos, and we have the opportunity to work across programs. And our land stewards and landowners in Benton County have diverse interests and needs. We're actually working with an elderly woman whose husband passed, and she's managing an old Christmas tree farm, and she's trying to figure out what her next steps are, what is possible. And so we are working across programs to find a support system for her, including connecting to her with other land stewards and owners as she feels quite isolated currently where she is. So I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of the programming we've been doing recently and to give some insight into the people that we work with in Benton County. I'm also excited to report that we will be joined by a new faculty position, Todd Anderson, in Benton County. He will be a small farms faculty in Benton County, Lynn County, and Polk County, and he is finishing his PhD currently at OSU and will be joining us in December. So hopefully you'll get to meet him at our next meet and greet. I'm also just really excited to see you all in person after years of presenting to you on Zoom. So it's wonderful to see your smiley faces. So just as an overview, who does the Small Farms Program serve? We work with beginner farmers and ranchers. Those are people in their first 10 years of trying to figure out how to do this. We work with experienced farmers and ranchers. We work with existing businesses like Gathering Together Farm that have been in our community for well over 30 years, and we help them to solve problems and continue to explore what's possible. We also work with commercial operations. We work with land stewards who are not interested in running a business. We work with what I like to call the farm curious, those who are trying to figure out if this is a fit for them. This is a photo of Goodfoot Farm, which is a local farmer that sells at the Corvallis Farmers Market. That's Beth Hoanaki. And this is a recent regional farm tour that she did that attracted people from all over the region. So one of the ways that we serve the diversity, right, that's a lot of different kinds of people that we interact with, are to facilitate and coordinate farmer networks. And so this is a powerful tool of extension as a convener. These farmer networks also have proven to be incredibly beneficial during times of crisis or need, like during COVID, during wildfires. We were able to leverage these networks to get support to people in a way that was incredibly efficient. And currently I help to coordinate 3 networks: the Willamette Women's Farmer Network, a regional farmer network, as well as one that specifically serves military veterans. And my colleague, Melissa Ferry, also is facilitating a agritourism network, which I'll talk about agritourism in a moment. And this is a picture on the bottom of me and one of the farmers that did a farm tour in our region, Pammy Monette. And then this is another example of a farm tour that was facilitated for the Women's Farm Network. This is actually at a medicinal plant sanctuary that's just up the road from here. And the farm host is sharing information about medicinal plants that could be sold in our region to basically put in place of internationally imported medicinal herbs. And this is through the Women's Farmer Network. So I really like to lift up and celebrate the work that we're doing with military veterans. We have been slowly growing a network of support. This is Jacob, and he's actually a Benton County farmer. He's a beginner farmer. He got out of the military about 8 years ago, was trying to figure out what his next steps were, and he actually was able to connect with our program. He fell in love with sheep, having never handled a sheep before, and we were able to connect him with some other farmers. This picture was actually taken at a farm tour that he offered to other military veterans to share his story. We've also had our pasture management faculty come and help him to actually look at how he's managing the pasture. He's also stepped into a mentor role and has had other veterans come out and explore what's possible. He's also leasing his land. He does not own it. He found the landowner through our regional farmer network. And once that identification was made, we helped him to navigate contracts. So what would need to be put into that lease, how to make it equitable and fair for both the landowner and himself. And so it's just a little glimpse of all the different touch points that we offer to a farmer or somebody exploring farming. The other exciting thing that we're doing is always trying to build, a vibrant local food economy. So the money, right? The business side of this. So there were some exciting new policies that passed that change the farm direct laws in Oregon this year. So we are holding some farm direct law update hands-on workshops. Things that are important to us are how do people keep it legal? How do they keep it safe as we're increasing, thankfully, what farmers can sell direct to consumers? We want to make sure they do it safely. So we're offering a couple of field to market workshops here in the next month for farmers. So my colleague, Melissa Ferry, who you may have met at previous meet and greets. So she is really focused in agritourism. That word basically just means anytime the public comes to your farm, and we look at it as farm direct marketing. And there is a whole lot of strategies that fall under this to increase sales and increase exposure of farms. Has anybody here been to a pumpkin patch this year? Yeah, okay. So that's agritourism. It's a way for direct to consumer sales. And we are interested in how to keep it legal, how to keep it safe, and how people can make informed decisions. So that we actually have an online course that's developing a successful agritourism business in Oregon. And we complement that online programming with in-person agricultural tourism 101s, options vary county to county, right? There's a lot of county implications for farmers on what is possible on their land. So we work closely with the county to identify what is possible so that we can set people up for success. And on the agritourism note, we are partnering with the university's economic impact and our local economist to do an impact study for agritourism in the Willamette Valley. And those reports are going to come out soon. And this is really going to inform potential policy and for us to all get an understanding of how important these on-farm direct marketing opportunities really are and how much our smaller scale farms rely on these pieces of their financial puzzle. So the other thing that we address is the aging out of farmers. So a lot of our landowners are, we used to say 60 plus, now we're starting to say 70 plus, and they're interested in keeping their farm farmed and they're interested in leasing, but they need some support in figuring out how to do that. So we've been holding in person because of the demographic, moving around the counties to hold in-person information sessions on really demystifying leasing, talking to them about contracts, how do they find farmers and ranchers, and how can we build equitable and successful farm lease arrangements. And, you know, our job is always to bridge the gap between the university and what's happening. This is a photo of a field day that we did for the Dry Farm Project. So this is looking at our changing climate and how are we going to be resilient and how are we going to continue to grow food in Benton County when our wells start to run dry and things shift. So the Dry Farming Project is an exciting example of a field day and where we connect research to the people. And also, you know, serving as that bridge, when I mentioned the medicinal herbs earlier, there's some really exciting research being done within the university on the viability of growing larger scale medicinal herbs in the Willamette Valley so that we can supplement that import. So we hold information sessions on that. And then other ways, you know, so many ways. We're always saying, how do we get information to the people? And one of my favorite parts right now is I get to do this podcast called For the Love of Farming. I will make sure you have the link to it if you want to really get intimate on some Benton County farmers and understand what's happening with them. We get a little personal in this. We did have farmer suicide this year. The numbers are higher than I'd care to admit in our region. And so this podcast is an attempt for us to get information that's practical, to tell the stories of farmers, but also to address mental health. So one of the questions is, how do you take care of yourself? What do you do to address stress? And so I've also partnered on campus with the agricultural mental health program to incorporate resources there. I'm also always interested in how do we get federal and state dollars into our counties and into the hands of farmers. And so when I hear about funding programs, I hold these information sessions. I often feel like a translator to farmers trying to navigate these overly complex application processes. And I want them to know it's worth their time. So there's a new batch of money that's called a local foods initiative that has a significant amount of USDA funding for farmers. I would love to see more of it coming into our county farmer hands. So we held a successful information session, and I'm asking for them to report back to me how many farms actually were successful in applying after that. And so this is just the slide that builds more on the agricultural tourism. And so these are pictures of Benton County agritourism sites that Melissa has visited. And that was a lot, but it's an overview of all the different strategies of how we support our people and the programming that we do. I'm happy to answer any questions that may have surfaced for you.
It's always really exciting to hear about the Small Farms Program. It's been wonderful to watch it grow over the last decade, and I'm glad to see that it's continuing to prosper and expand in terms of staff capacity. And also very interested and grateful to hear that you all are involved in that intergenerational transfer question, because there are so many young farmers that want to expand but don't have ground. And again, the folks that are aging out. So it's a wonderful bridge. I don't have any questions, just took notes about resources that you all have that I can share with some of my friends.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate the presentation and nice to see you in person, Laurel. I've known your predecessor and your predecessor's predecessor, and so that was Rick Fletcher. And I have a tree farm in Kings Valley and really have appreciated the help from Extension when we were starting out. Didn't know much about growing trees. So Extension was very helpful, especially in the beginning, but it's nice to see the expansion of the small farm effort and the Willamette Valley. We can grow almost anything, and olives, we're growing olives. Who knew? So appreciate the update and kind of find out what's going on currently, because you folks do, I think, a good job of keeping up. One question, I know there's, and it's part of Extension, but the fire positions, 6 positions around the state, and I've actually lost track of who our local contact is there. But do you have much contact with those folks? Speaking of silos and making sure that the needed information is getting around.
So Kayla Bordelane is our local fire specialist, and I am building a connection with her as well as fire specialists around the state just to keep up on what's going on. So I think we do a pretty good job of having meetings within the Forestry and Natural Resources group, which includes the fire folks, and also as a group of Extension folks to keep each other on the same page. So yes, we are all very much in contact.
I'm remembering a very nice program in Wren last spring with fire. I think fire was the theme, and how to keep your community and your own property as safe as you can from the threat of wildfires. And it was very well attended. That topic seems to have people's attention. And like you say, there's resources and you folks helping connect the landowners to resources. So yes, keep up the good work. Any other questions or comments?
Quick question. Is there still a watershed extension specialist? I know there was one for a while, but.
No, there's not a specific.
So because I just went through the onboarding process, I have the organizational chart fresh in my brain, and I do know that there is a vacant position. I'm not sure if they're looking to fill it or not, but it looks like it has in the past been a filled specialist position, and it's vacant at the moment.
Okay. Curious, just, given water issues, and I know there's some focus on groundwater in the Extension Office for Benton County, but just water quality and quantity overall, I think, is increasingly an issue. So wondering about that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it would be very helpful to have a position like that filled. And in lieu of that, we do work very closely with the Soil Water Conservation District, the Natural Resource Conservation Services to try to leverage those within the county. And it would be great to have an additional.
Do you also work with the permaculture program at OSU?
Yeah, there's been some communications and sending people back and forth, and there's definitely some crossover in terms of the support. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you mentioned replacing the Christmas tree specialist. I assume Chal Angren retired recently, and you mentioned, would you repeat who the new specialist is? Or is it, that's a work in progress?
It's a work in progress. Man, yeah. They are looking to hire with the new monies that they received, and I was looking at our director's list, and it literally is on the very top of the list.
Okay.
So I know it's a priority. And as soon as we find out more about that, I will be sure to share.
Well, and Rich Regan has kept me up to date on that also. So, who, refresh my memory, how many counties does he oversee, or does anybody know?
I don't know.
Oh,
It's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. So are we talking about
Rich Riggs.
Rich Riggs? Yeah, so he oversees 6 counties. And I know he has been definitely working towards making sure that that happens as a priority, because all of the regional directors come together and present their cases to the director of extension and say, we really need this position. And so some of them are regional positions and some of them are statewide positions. So I know he's been an advocate for that particular position.
Well, and the structure used to be each county had a person like, I remember Rick Fletcher got tapped. I mean, kind of rotated. Okay, now it's your turn to do more administrative duties, and I assume for budgetary reasons, that kind of administration is now one person, many counties, and so I do occasionally see Rich, and it's a challenging job.
Yes, yes, it is.
So, okay. Well, thank you for the debate, and forward to more notices of programs and workshops and tours. And
Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
always welcome to join our programming. Walk a farm and see what.
I do that pretty regularly.
Somebody else.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a
Who is the
lot.
officer? Again?
Oh, Damien?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We can hear you, Damien.
Well, thank you very much for your support. We appreciate it, and looking forward to our visit in a couple of weeks. All right. Thank you. We'll take care.
All right, I think we'll take a 10-minute break here and then come back. We have the consent calendar, and we will have a public hearing like that. Welcome back. Next up is our consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Next, we'll do old business, discussion on media policy. We have Vance Crony and Rachel McEnany.
So this was the item that our PIO brought to you, oh gosh, must have been about a month ago now. And following that presentation, there was some questions raised by both the media and members of the public. As a result of that, some of those questions that were raised, I worked with PIO and Rick Krager, acting county administrator at the time, and suggested a couple of revisions that would address some of the concerns raised by the media. Put those changes together, and those are found specifically on pages 74 and 75 of your or of your packet. They are to paragraph 6, subsection C, and I take that back. That is subsection G, and that's on page 77, 78. And I apologize for the formatting. I tried to keep it clean, but every time I did it, it just got wonky. And because it was in track changes, it was difficult. But the essence of the changes were to remove the rationale or justification for declining interviews from the media. Once Rachel arrived at the county, she also had a couple of items that she wished to have addressed in the media policy as well. So it was good timing for her to add her changes to the suggested changes. So I'll let her take it away from there.
Just overall, we tried to clean up the policy with the feedback from our media partners and listening to our constituency and also from all three commissioners' concerns. We, of course, want to give the media and the public reasonable expectations in a timely manner for public information. We believe this is a much more transparent and more accessible policy for our partners, and we are following best practices.
All right, any questions? Well, I guess. No, just I think more of a comment. Appreciate clarifying what our positions are and how we handle media requests, and so it's been a work in progress, and I appreciate the effort to kind of clean things up and clarify. There was some confusion, and it wasn't just from the media. Some of our community members were also voiced some concerns about well, what's going on. So I think this is helpful.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to our staff for working on bringing back a new version of this. I think it was important for us to listen to the feedback that we received. I have, so one question, it's not a big deal. The part where we took out the waiting times, I think Rachel, you and I had a brief discussion about that, and I'm fine taking it out. I just, from my point of view, I think it at least gave realistic expectations to the media to know, but I mean, if we're still covering that same gist, you know, if the media still understands that we need a little bit of time to answer their questions, then I think it's okay. You know, in an effort to make sure we have the correct information, and, you know, it's not like we're all sitting around doing nothing all day. Everyone's working, and it'll take a little bit for people to take a break from what they're doing and find the information.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think the one of the reasons we took some of the timetables out is every day is different. Sometimes information is very easy to access. We have a lot of our workers now work telecommuting wise. Sometimes it takes a little time. But, you know, one of the things I think that's very important about a public information office is that we are available to the media even after hours, and we will do every effort to work with them, as long as they will work with us as well, on providing the right information. So that's our commitment to working with everyone, so we can get out the right information when we can.
Well, and that was my comment was some requests for information are fairly simple and straightforward, and can be done fairly quickly, and some need research. And so I think in the initial discussion, a lot of times, especially if you're talking about the GT, they're on deadline and will call shortly before their deadline. And sometimes we can accommodate that immediate request, and often we can't. I mean, because the goal is accuracy and just something off the cuff sometimes is not a good answer. So I think it makes sense to be able to take things on a case-by-case basis and let whoever is requesting the information know how soon we can get them an answer. Any other questions or comments, or I would entertain a motion?
Just a brief comment. I think that the intent of the policy that we're now amending was to provide kind of a full context and transparency about what we can do and what we want to do in terms of sharing objective and information about what's going on. And I'm very disappointed that in this polarized climate, that the fact that we were trying to be as open and clear as possible about how we want to work with the media was perceived as an attack on the media. It was definitely not intended that way. And so I want to just make it clear that what we've done is we've omitted all of those sections that seemed prescriptive about how we would interact with journalists, and left it much more flexible so we can address situations on a case-by-case basis. So I want to thank everyone that did provide input, both from the community and from our media partners. I think we are a little bit closer to where we started in terms of looking at this media policy, but I think that this will serve us well moving forward.
It seemed to me that the majority of people that emailed us and stated that they had an issue with our policy, I don't believe that they actually read the policy. I believe that they just read the Gazette Times, and because this policy, it seemed like people had the assumption that we made a policy that simply said, we're going to start a list of media we're not going to talk to. But in fact, this is a 20-page policy. And that was, like, as Commissioner Ogerow said, meant to have realistic expectations. And it was one small part of this 20-page policy. So.
Well, I would be happy to make a motion to adopt the media policy as revised by staff.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Well, and I would second the notion, appreciate the effort that went into this, and that it was never our intention to restrict communication with the media. And I think our original policy was really misinterpreted, but I think these revisions clarify what our real intentions are. So thank the staff for moving this along. Next up, department reports. Authorizing the payment of property taxes to certain municipalities or other taxing districts in advance of the tax year 2023-24 is authorized by ORS 311.392. Debbie Bauer, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Debbie. It's nice to see all of you.
Maybe move the mic slightly closer.
So every year we take the smaller districts and we buy them out of our large funds, and that way they can service their districts with the money that they get through the tax services. And so this year we raised the amount to 16,000. Last year it was 15,000, and it really helps with the road districts for the most part to get their money so that they can fix their potholes. I don't know if there's any other, I can answer any other questions.
I might just rephrase what you're saying, just so for clarity, to make sure I'm understanding and anyone that might be watching and listening. So basically what we're doing is instead of dribbling out the tax dollars that come in and dividing it across all of the county tax districts, we are providing 16,000 upfront so that people, these accounts have money in them immediately at the beginning
Right,
of the
some of-
tax year, correct?
Correct. Some of the districts are like $2,000. And so if we spanned that out over the year, they would just be getting teeny tiny amounts. And so if we can put them together, that helps. So,
And just to clarify, it's districts with levies of less than $16,000 or less. It's not just $16,000 flat for everybody. There you go, red on top, yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's correct. So it ends up being that the amount, let's see, is $128,330.24 that the county will, that's called buy them out of the funds and distribute them before December 1st, so that we save the 3% discount to them, give them their money.
Thanks. That's what I really wanted to clarify, because
I'm
buying
sorry.
out sounds like a kind of a funny phrase, I think, to anyone that might be listening. And what it is we're giving them their money, but we're just giving them their money in advance because we have the funds. We're liquid enough to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a state statute and we can choose to do it or we can choose not to do it. So, yeah.
And I assume it's a matter of efficiency. I mean, you're taking care of some smaller amounts in one
Yes.
operation instead of parceling it out through the tax year.
Right. The small districts appreciate getting that so that they can really fix their roads. It's mostly road districts that we deal with.
I'm happy to make a motion, Chair.
Have at it.
I move to approve authorizing the payment of property taxes to certain municipalities and other taxing districts as detailed in the attachment to order number 2023-077.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, 8.2 budget note, report on external fleet. We have Gary Stockoff. And Rick Krager. And this is a topic we've talked about before, and you're giving us an update.
Sir, good morning, commissioners. Good to see you all. Yes, Gary and I are here today to provide you what it was part of our adopted budget. As you all recall, we put 2 budget notes forward. Both of them are, and you're going to hear both of those here this morning, but specifically related to 2 of our enterprise funds, one of them being the external fleet program, which Gary and I are going to speak to, and then following that will be our community health centers, which Lacey and myself will speak to. So just to kind of start out, and this material is provided to you, but just a quick short presentation to. Oh, yep, I need the other one, sorry. They look kind of the same, so no worries. So while we're bringing that up, I guess first is just a review of the note. And again, part of our concerns in relation to the external fleet program was essentially the ongoing financial viability of that. And part of what we were going to do was come back here within the first 3 months and be able to give you an update on where things stand and also recommendations as we go forward into this biennium. So almost there. Well, I'll talk from the paper so you guys can take a look at it. So let me just start with a little bit of background to kind of ground our discussion here today. I think as most of you know, our external fleet program is run by the Public Works Department, which Gary charges up. We have both internal and external fleet, and that's very important. Two very different types of businesses, while all of it is essentially all rolled together under the good supervision of Keith Nicholson, who is here today also for any questions that you might have. Just as in terms of setting some additional information for this, is the internal fleet program is essentially funded through internal assessment. So basically we go through every biennium and establish what that assessment's going to be. It's a fixed amount. It gets paid by each and every department and then basically offsets the cost in relation to the internal. External is very different in that this is focused specifically on external organization, government organizations, jurisdictions in which we provide services to them, but it's a fee for services. So there's no guarantee. We have X amount of cost, but we have to make sure that we reach a number of billable hours to actually be able to afford that. Again, just want to differentiate those two. With internal assessment, the dollars are there. With external, you have to actually be able to leverage that through additional earnings through service fees. From a cost standpoint, and this is also important in that the way we do the cost, because essentially it looks like one fleet program, but we have to be able to use typically staff time, mechanics, the time that they're working, the time and effort that they're spending on external versus internal. And then in addition, we have fixed costs, as we know that spreads across both of those. And like all programs, we have to have a methodology in which we actually break those costs apart. And again, that's typically the time spent by the staff. Prior to 2019, and everything that I'm talking about was in one fund. And it was recognized, rightly so, that that was incorrect accounting practices. What we're talking about with our internal fleet is what is an internal service fund in the world of government accounting. What we're talking about with external, when we're serving an outside party for a service for fee, that is a enterprise fund. Two very, very different funds, two very, very different accounting treatments. So that was changed, but before 2019, there was really just no recognition of the cost or any of the revenues earned for either. So beginning in 2019-21, we were able to acquire a software package that was able to help us with that, distinguishing it a little bit more. Of course, we were also in the middle of COVID when all of that happened, and there was lots of challenges for the entire county, but fleet was no exception to that. Actually, again, by the slowdown of business that we had, as well as some of the challenges we had with just time lost with staff. So what happened in 2019-21 was essentially a $465,000 deficit in our enterprise fund. We had to fill that void, and we did, and you all approved the use of American Rescue Plan Act's dollars to be able to fill that. And then, and I did misspeak there a little bit, that first year we did not, that first biennium, we did not have the Mercury model. Put the Mercury model in place in 2021, the beginning of that biennium. And that really kind of brings us to what I spoke about a few months ago at the budget hearing. At the time, I think I was, again, mentioning to you that we were looking at another potential deficit in that program. I can now tell you and affirm with you that there was a deficit, and that deficit was just slightly less than $600,000. That's done. That's a deficit that we now have to be able to address. But I think there's some important things to make sure that we recognize with this. I think first and foremost, it's appropriate to say that the fleet shop relies on the mechanics. I mean, they're key to the work, and it's hard to hire. It's hard to hire mechanics. It's hard to keep mechanics. Right now, they're down 2 staff. So 2 of 7, that's not good. So again, that creates a challenge in itself. I know Gary, Keith, and others are doing everything they can to make this work, but when you simply lose your mechanics, that's difficult. So I think that's just a reality that we need to address. I think the other piece, though, that is important to recognize, and this is something different than what I had talked to you about a few months ago, is we started studying the Mercury model a little bit more. There's a problem with it. And that problem is, and I'll be the first to sit here and say that, I've talked to you a lot about targets, billable hours. You've seen my charts, and I know they're in here as well, about having to reach certain amounts of targets to be able to make the external fleet program work. It won't happen. And I'm going to tell you that right now. It won't happen because the Mercury model was dependent on the number of, they were looking at total hours for every mechanic by no proration between the businesses. So basically what we were saying is that you'd have to spend every amount of your time on the external fleet to make this happen. And obviously we know that's not possible because you guys can work on the internal fleet. That was the flaw in the model. The only way you fix that flaw is that you change it to the rate that the Mercury model would require under revision. And that would be, looking back a biennium ago, $200 per hour. So in comparison, we were $132 per hour last biennium. So again, it can work, but obviously it's going to be expensive and likely unaffordable for our government jurisdictions. And we also know well above where many of our market rates are at. So again, want to be just really transparent in that is what I, needing to communicate to you is that, Keith and his staff will continue to work hard and continue to do the best, but under the way it is currently established, the way it is approved in the 23-25 budget, we will not be in a positive situation. So bringing us up to 23-25, just as a reminder to you all what we did approve. You knew that I had some concerns going into this, so what we approved was a $150,000 reserve, just in case we did face another deficit for this biennium, but we also approved one additional mechanic. As I said, Keith right now is down 2 mechanics already. So that is also contributing to our inability to get to a break even, I guess the best way to say it. So again, this is just a reminder to you of what I had presented in May. You can see, and as I always like to point out, was the purple line, you might remember, was the targets that you had to work, billable hours, and you can see what the results had been. And again, the only difference now is that's not achievable. It just simply is not achievable because that would mean every one of your mechanics was spending the majority of their time on external fleet, which is not feasible. So that brings us to kind of where we see things going at this point. And I guess just real quickly, in terms of, as I mentioned, with the deficiency that is in the Mercury model, and if we were to recalibrate it, what that would mean for this biennium is that if we wanted to make that work, we would be charging $208 per hour. That's what the rate would need to be to get to what we think would balance. What our approved rate is $143 per hour. That's what we have started. We did build some flexibility for us that we could change these annually based on where the market is. Based on our most recent, which I think was January for the market, I think it was roughly around $155. So you can see that we are still trending below that. So there is possible room for improvement, but clearly wouldn't get to $208 per hour. Based on what we're seeing right now, as of September 30th, and again, remind you of all the things I've said here, that there is certainly the challenges of staffing. We're looking at about an $81,000 deficit as of September 30th. If I were to trend that forward, things continue to just be the way they are. That would mean we'd be looking at a $650,000 deficit by the end of the biennium. And that's basically, again, like I said, I don't think that would continue, particularly if we get the 2 positions hired, and it would obviously be lower than that, but it obviously would not come to a break-even standpoint. So I think, that kind of brings me to the end in terms of what our recommended next step will be. So first of all, again, in summary, we already have incurred a $600,000 deficit for last biennium. We will be coming to you in December and dealing with that through the budget supplement, Jen and I. So I want to make you aware of that. Number two, we're already trending where we're, moving towards that. I think at this juncture, we really kind of come down to three choices, which I think we need to do a little more work and come back to you. I'm proposing at your goal setting in January. And really, it is about a couple things. One, we can continue to do the program just the way it is today and try to always be more efficient and try to reduce that deficit. But at the end of the day, we can continue to subsidize it. That's what we have been doing for the last 4 years. We can continue to do that. It comes down to priorities. We subsidize other programs as well. So that's a choice. Another option is you could simply discontinue it. Now, the one thing I want to make sure I'm clear about when I say discontinue, and Keith, if Keith was sitting here next to me, he would, because I hear him in my ears right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean because you're talking about a lot of fixed cost, right? That program is responsible for. A lot of that fixed cost doesn't go away if external fleet goes away. So what that means, internal fleet assessment is what usually bears. So you see higher rates in that. So again, I just want to be really, really clear and transparent about that, is that would be one of the results. In addition, there's a lot of obviously jurisdictions that need that or depend on that service, particularly if they're smaller. Which brings me to the third option is, do we look at something different? Do we consider looking at something smaller, really focused specifically maybe on your small jurisdictions, if that's really where the niche needs to be. Now, at the end, do I think it's going to pencil? Probably not. You're still going to be in a subsidy situation, but maybe not as big. Or the other option, I know this has been a discussion by Joe Kirby and others in the past, is the idea of regionalization, which is bigger. That's a lot more than just us. That's other partners. That's really coming together with the city, perhaps the university, and maybe talking about a model that could work at a larger level. So those are kind of the three options that I see. I'm not asking you to choose an option. This is really just more information for you. We need to come back and give you a little more information about what that could look like and really get your direction on where do you want to go for the rest of the biennium. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my quick overview. I would invite Gary if he wants to add anything that I perhaps missed.
No, I don't really have anything. It just, if you have questions, then, the commitment is to continue to look to become efficient, cost effective. And, I think we've made great strides in the last 5-6 years, but clearly we have some hurdles to still address. And one of the biggest ones right now is recruitment. We had a failed recruit a month ago. We've got another one out now with 2 positions. We'll see how that goes. But it is just so highly competitive out there. And again, the board was very generous a few years back and boosted the salaries. That helped us a lot. We have a model that, with 410s and benefits that does appeal to a lot of folks. But I think everybody's kind of starting to look at kind of doing those things. And so it's a tough pool to recruit in right now.
Just one last quick thing, Mr. Chairman, and again, just to Gary's credit and to Keith, I just want to, and I'm sure you all know this is absolutely no reflection of Gary nor Keith. I know they have worked endlessly hard on this. We've been, since I started here, worked with Gary and Keith quite a bit. And I know that they put everything forward in trying to make this the most efficient possible, but sometimes it's just, the cost is X and the model is set up. You can't be able to make it all balance. And I think that's really where we're at and what we need to be able to say and then address appropriately.
I have just a couple of questions or comments and not about necessarily the specifics of this situation, but what kind of information we might need in order to choose between these options moving forward. I think one thing that would be really helpful to me is to know who our external clients are and just to get a sense for in-county, out-of-county, and what their ability to pay is. I know most of them are pretty strapped. Even someone like the city of Corvallis is not flush by any means. So, but that would be helpful information to have it to think through that second option of trying to focus those services. We've talked about a kind of a regional fleet model for a while, and I know that there were some initial conversations, and there was a consulting report that OSU commissioned as well. And then we never heard anything about the results of those analyses. So I would welcome the opportunity to think about what that would mean, what a larger regional partnership might look like, and how realistic that might be. And is it a matter of political will or understanding better what the obstacles are and how long it would take for something like that to actually make a difference, because it still won't make a difference overnight. You know, as you say, we're probably still looking at that deficit of almost $700,000 for this biennium, and hopefully not into the following biennium. It's a tough nut. And I'm just grateful that we have much better data now than we did, and we can better understand the problem. Lastly, as I understand it, any of the for-profit mechanics and the dealerships aren't in any better situation in terms of hiring mechanics. So I think it's just a problem that we're facing across the economy, another one of those. And so the only other thing I can think of is working more closely with the LBCC program that trains mechanics and hiring folks before they get out of program, just scooping them up, doing more apprenticeship type programs.
What we found with that, Commissioner, is there are companies that will actually hire the person, pay for them to go through the training, and then they hire them at the end. We just heard that about, we had one of our people go through CDL training at Knife River. Well, there was 5 in the class, 2 of them were Knife River employees that they were paying to be there to get their CDL, and then they had a job at the end. So we have looked into that before. That's a little bit of a tough one sometimes, but again, we're trying everything we can to open up the recruitment, our capabilities to get people here. If I could respond to the regionalization just real quick. I think our first run at this was OSU had shown some interest in teaming up with us and combining the fleets. And we went along for a while with that kind of being the case. And then kind of at the 11th hour, the plug was pulled on that one by OSU. And we then just kind of let it set for a while. But I think since then, there's been some initial discussions maybe with Corvallis and teaming up with them. So that's something we have not pursued recently just because we've all had so many other things on our plates to deal with. But I think that's still sitting out there to see what Corvallis might be interested in doing.
I would just add on to what Gary just said. And so during my interim stint in meeting with Mr. Mark Shepard, I'm not sure if Rachel has talked to him yet about this, but he did mention, I told him that this was a conversation that was going to be coming up in front of the board in the very near future. And he did express a willingness to have conversations about looking at some form of regionalization. So I do think the door is open for us to have that conversation.
I just have another comment of if we are truly going to go to an electrified fleet at some point, we really are going to have to look at our mechanics if they are going to have the training and the skill set to be able to maintain those vehicles, and also, you know, further infrastructure down the line. If, you know, as we continue to aggressively go after federal funding and green infrastructure, that this is something that we also have to expect of, you know, what our plan is to go to a more of an electrified fleet.
We have looked at that a little bit, and we're coming to learn of many regulations and restrictions that apply to working on electric vehicles. As in our shop, we couldn't facilitate working on them at our shop, let alone having somebody that's qualified to do that. And as you know, they can be very dangerous as you talk about the batteries and stuff. So that is something we will definitely look more into, but it may be one that as electric vehicles come in, for the time being, we have to outsource that as the most cost-effective and efficient way to handle those. But we're looking at that obviously as well, just the whole electrification and the charging systems and how that all will impact. And then with many, like with our road stuff, there's not electric vehicles. We don't have electric road graders and, you know, I suppose it'd be cool, but right now we're still working on just sedans and maybe a pickup. We did, I think, get our first electric vehicle. We have fully electric. We have our Ford Lightning has arrived. Portland, it's getting charged.
It's getting closer.
Closer.
Yeah, and the good thing about the electrics is that they do take a lot less maintenance, but we're not in that world yet.
Well,
I thank you. And I just wanted to say thank you also for highlighting that it's not any fault of, our mechanics or any of our staff. And in fact, our fleet has received numerous awards, top 10, I believe, right, in the country or internationally or something like that. So they do very good work, which we are appreciative of. I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Ojero said. In what would be helpful for me is knowing who some of our clients are. And then also knowing what the other options are, the competition or where would our external clients go if we were to no longer offer that service.
Well, again, I appreciate the effort to understand where we're really at financially and little bit of a struggle to get there, but I think this information is important. I just, at this point, I think it makes sense to continue as we're currently doing or try to get bigger. I just, without the benefit of facts and figures, getting smaller, you still have a lot of overhead, and I think that might make the challenge of making this as financially viable as we can even harder. And I like the talk, other jurisdictions are in the same boat, lack of mechanics, increased costs. And I would think there would be some economies of scale if we could get even slightly bigger. And the other part of this, speaking from personal experience, the Kings Valley Fire Department uses the county service, county mechanics, and maybe we don't have a lot of options. And so it is a service to smaller jurisdictions that don't have the clout of saying, we're going to take our business elsewhere, like some jurisdictions have done, and the rate that we can charge has to be in the ballpark of what's out there. I mean, we're not on an island. This is the larger jurisdictions that have multiple vehicles help pay the bills. And the other part is thinking about fire trucks or kind of specialized equipment. That expertise is hard to come by, and if we can keep the mechanics that have that, or attract the mechanics that have those skills, I think that that's an important service. So, I mean, there's two aspects. There's how are we doing financially, but also keeping emergency vehicles running. And there may be a need for a subsidy, but it would be nice if it was a smaller subsidy. I saw something through September 30th, $81,000. I assume that's the first quarter of the biennium, and then you multiplied that by 8 and got the 640,000.
Said that's obviously I would look at hopefully kind of a worst case scenario. Obviously, you never know what's going to happen in the future. You don't expect the vacancies to continue, but I think we want to be conservative, at least in terms of our estimates at this point.
And I think Commissioner Ojero mentioned the third-party assessment that was done a couple of years ago, and is that are we using that as our blueprint for going forward, or what was the? And I don't necessarily need an answer right now, but what was the value of that assessment?
I believe the assessment was the one that was done by Mercury about the model, and that's what we used to go forward. The first model was through APWA, and Keith had used that from the previous employer. And they're both, in there, they're both very functional. So I think that's what that assessment was for, Commissioner. And from then, it's a matter of assessing and analyzing the model to see where it's working well or where, as Rick pointed out, missed it by that much on some things. So that's where we're at now, is just refining it and working within it and then adjusting it to make sure it's what we're needing it to do and the information we need to get from it.
I guess at this point, my thought would be to continue as we're set up currently, try to fill those positions and see if we can reduce the deficit that because I think that's doable, but I do appreciate the information. Well, this is where we're at as of now, and keeping us informed what some possible options are going forward.
It sounds like we'll be discussing this further in January. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, Commissioner Wise, you're correct. That our intent is not to do anything at this point. We will obviously continue to operate as we have been and do everything we can to, as we have continued to do, try to reduce that deficit as much as we can. So we will come back. My intent would be to come back here goal setting in January with a little bit more fleshed out information about some of these options. One thing I will just say that isn't on this list that we can have some conversations about too, but also to put in front of you is the question of community capacity in terms of we as government are typically filling a niche that the private sector can't. And so are there things that we should be or can be doing to help bolster that capacity so that government perhaps doesn't have to provide those? Again, I know that based on our discussion, there's not a lot of capacity, and I think that's always going to be a challenge, but might be something we want to think about is are there things that we as government should do to try to help, to try to support those businesses in a way that maybe takes some of the burden off. But again, that's more of a hybrid approach, and we can provide all those different options for discussion in January.
Well, that sounds good, and I think it's important that there are two aspects to what we're talking about, and that's the service provided, and then at what cost. And we pay for various services around the county, and it's just nice to have a clearer picture of what the actual cost is, and if there needs to be a subsidy, at least that we know that we're subsidizing something ahead of time and figure out, well, do we want to continue to do that? And so I think that these are important questions to get better answers on going forward. And find a couple mechanics. I mean, I realize the challenge there, but and it's just not in your department that that can be a challenge, but being more creative. In the good old days, we could sit back and have people come to us, and that's not the current situation. So,
Well, let us know if we can help with the hiring stuff. Like I can make cookies, whatever it takes.
All willing to help.
That will help.
You know, I keep putting my application for mechanic, but keeps denying me. So I'm not sure.
He's tough, and I think needs to be. Well, thank you, and I think we will circle back to our public hearing since it's after 11 o'clock. It's in the matter of public hearing regarding amending Benton County County Code, Chapter 9, Ordinance number 2023 days. Well, I've got a question here. In the packet, it's 0321. So that's the correct. So in the agenda, it's incorrect. So that's 2023 days 0321. Tommy Douglas.
Hi there, everyone.
So we'll have a staff report, and then there's Christy Schrock who wishes to make comment.
Great, thank you all. We are here today, as we know, regarding the amendment of Benton County Code Chapter 9, commonly known as the Wild and Exotic Animal Ordinance. This ordinance was enacted in 2021 in response to local animal advocates calling attention to the great amounts of suffering in live animal shows. You recall it was COVID times, and Netflix was showing 6 million people Tiger King across the country, and folks were, for very good reason, concerned about animal welfare. The original ordinance was, however, discovered to have some flaws after approval, specifically the original use of Latin taxonomic categories that inadvertently included some domestic livestock animals or crossbreeds. And it was frankly difficult for staff to enforce without a zoological or animal science background, either fairground staff or sheriff's department. In August, this body asked staff to draft an amendment that would solve for some of these challenges and ensure that we don't create any unintended barriers for our many 4-H, FFA, and rodeo programs at the fairgrounds that the agricultural and ranching communities depend upon. Willamette Valley feeds the world. We need to make sure that we take care of these resources and take care of these amazing farming and ranching families. So unlike the process of creating this original ordinance, which was famously contentious, this time I want to thank everyone, including the Board of Commissioners and staff and all of our passionate community stakeholders for engaging in a very collegial process that I think is ensuring that animal welfare will be taken seriously in Benton County, as well as ensuring that agricultural, ranching, and farming families and communities are protected from additional unnecessary or unintended regulations. So thank you all sincerely for your thoughtful and democratic approach to this process. And thanks especially to all the folks that serve on the fair and rodeo boards who have patiently educated me through this process and been there, regardless of how they personally feel about the necessity of an animal welfare ordinance, have volunteered their time to help us all out. So thank you again for all of those who've brought their opinions to bear, and I'm excited to hear more public comment.
So public comment next?
Yes. Dang it. It needs to be automatic for me because I always forget. I'm sorry. So many changes have been incorporated after this was presented to you 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. So we tried to incorporate those that move this forward, this ordinance forward.
Okay. We will now take public comment. Christy Schrock is signed up, so come up to the table, please. You're on. Oh, you're off. You're on.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I'm here as a rural Benton County citizen first, and I am also on the Fair Board now. Was not at the onset of this process. Part of the concerns that I still have with the new ordinance or with the amendments is under the definition part on number 4, it still has the animals listed are intended as examples and not to be construed as an exhaustive list or limit the generality of each group of animals and also otherwise specified. Just have a lot of concerns that that kind of leaves things open-ended for animals to be listed. Because down through the list, yes, it's nice that the Latin names have been taken out, but part of through the modification, the changes here, I do understand things are kind of addressed in different spots where 4-H and FFA and rodeo have been added in as exempt now, at the fairgrounds. But because earlier version had exemptions that listed some of the basic livestock animals and, inadvertently had missed exempting horses because that initial list was looked at as animals that 4-H was showing during fair, and 4-H fair is held prior to the regular county fair. And the when the Latin names were in here, it still included horses, and I know we've been told over and over that that was taken out, but I've never been able to find anything in writing showing that as far as on the county website and whatnot with the amendment. So, want to just, I guess, have that in writing and see that that's confirmed. And then I've noticed that under the prohibition, 9.810, section 2A, there originally had been a list of multiple associations that could be used if you were a member, part of those organizations that gave you some clarification and in being exempt from some of these, and some of those have been stricken. OWRA, the NWRA, and whatnot. And I like to see some of those national and international associations that are respected stay in there because it doesn't limit people's possibility of involvement. Do appreciate that some of the other groups are added in. I know we added education in. I feel, again, that's a little general and that it's not clarified real well what is considered education, because I know there's groups out here, even within our own county, that are respected not only locally and throughout our state, but also nationally by major federal government offices. And they're an educational program that they have. But I'm not sure that they're connected with some of these groups that were listed in Section A. And so I don't know if those programs that, even though most people accept them as being educational, I don't know how that's defined to make sure that they're exempt from this. And I'm also, it gets to be little tiny things because I want to make sure that everything's clear and concise. Because I worry about assuming this is the way something's meant to be, but then down the road, somebody can come in and really fight it and bring it out. So, like with the rodeos, we've had groups coming into our fairgrounds, and we've had a lot of groups that would like to come in that do smaller events than a full rodeo. Might be one event that's in the rodeo, and want to make sure that those groups can still do that as a standalone group, like the Oregon Barrel Race Association or Women's Pro Rodeo Association. Some of those things that if our actual fairground staff or rodeo committee is not hands-on involved, because that's part of what our rodeo committee, speaking now as a fair board member, our rodeo committee has been trying to bring up more interest in activities that will get groups to come rent our facilities and provide more economic impact in that way. And actually early on during the, little side note, but during the transit tax stuff, when that was coming out, our rodeo committee was a key part of getting more funding for the fairgrounds because we were documenting and recording a large influx of people from outside of our county were coming and using our facilities at events that we were putting on. So just trying to make sure that some of that continues. And on the educational part, kind of going back, one of the early things that got caught in kind of this confusion with this original ordinance was a stingray exhibit that came to fair. And, a lot of people are going to consider that an educational display. I know that's what it was considered when it was booked for our fair, was that it was an educational display. Concerns were brought out that at the work session 2 weeks ago, that stingrays don't like to be touched, that's not good for them. And that was a little bit frustrating that those comments are still being made when documentation has been provided to the commissioners from a accredited research facility, because the Chicago Zoo and Aquarium did a study, and that information was presented to the commissioners, and it showed that there was very similar health-wise and everything with the stingrays that were in a petting pool versus those in natural habitat. That there, let's see, the health was similar between the touch pool and the habitat pool, and that was, there was some documentation of research that was presented, and it was kind of brushed aside with personal feelings. And so that gets to be a little frustrating that, we've tried to present some information and research that kind of counteracts some of these things. And some of the animals that are listed have been domesticated animals too. And how do we then define which ones of those are domesticated and which ones are wild? That gets to be kind of confusing. But, so thank you for that. It's just, I think as a fair board member, we just really want to make sure we stay on the animal welfare side of thing and not on the animal rights. Animal welfare is, I think, more representative of our county as a whole.
All right, thank you for your testimony. I guess Christy Schrock was the only one that signed up. Is there any other, anybody else that wants to testify at this point? Hearing none, we'll close the public testimony.
I can't tell if anybody online wants to testify. Is there? Nope. Okay.
Thank you for checking. So, are we ready for the first reading?
No.
No.
No, you need to bring it back to the commissioner's public testimony portion is now closed, and now it's a discussion for the three of you.
I wanted to thank Christy for her testimony and to state that the phrase in that section 4, the animals listed are intended as examples and not to be construed as an exhaustive list. I did not intend for that to remain in this version of the ordinance. This was intended more to be the list and not have that open-endedness that creates ambiguity. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I did not realize that that was still there. With respect to the stingray comment, I still have not seen that study. And until I've seen it and have had a chance to read it and calibrate it, I'm not very comfortable with that. I know that it's not best practice to pet stingrays in most of the aquaria I've been to. Yes, invertebrates, but not fish. So I would beg to differ on that point, but I don't want to quibble. But the last point I would make is that there's constant debate about which association is really science-based and which is not. And I'm comfortable with the list that we have now with just the Association of Zoos and Aquaria and the World Association of Zoos and Aquaria as the two credentialing associations, because there have been examples of some of the others approving of so-called educational exhibits that really don't have good records for animal handling. And it's not necessarily just what they do when they are on site in the county. It's all of the transit and all of the other parts of their operations that need to be taken into account. So with that, I would be comfortable changing that first point but I would prefer to leave the rest of the ordinance as it is.
I would just mention as well that Section 2C does mention veterinary clinics, wildlife rescue and rehabilitation facilities. So I think that's covered by that.
I think the group that is somewhat left out in the cold, but not completely, because it only excludes a couple of animals that they show, is Brad's World of Reptiles. And yes, there are a couple of species that are listed in the exclusion list that he does regularly travel with.
All right. So if we're going to make any changes, we have to start over.
Let's make a motion.
No, so what I'm, based on what I hear from Commissioner Ojero, my suggestion would be to, in section 9.805, subsection 4, remove that second sentence entirely. If that's the direction you choose to go, then your motion would be to approve the ordinance as amended.
Thank you.
So is that a motion?
I would make that motion.
I will second for discussion. So my question or concern is, what if somebody wants to bring an animal that we missed here, but it's clearly, the general public would be like, yeah, that's an exotic animal. And I don't have any concrete ideas coming to my head, but I'm just thinking like that, what if? So that I feel like that section sort of covers us if we've missed one.
Well, to me, we need some clarity, and if it's not listed, I mean, we're trying to give direction to the fair folks and others that work with animals, and to have, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. doesn't seem very helpful to letting people know what our rules are.
I'm fine with a finite list for now. I think that this is a pretty exhaustive list, and we will learn. And as we know, code is not something fixed in stone. It is mutable, and we have changed this before, and it may end up being changed again. But we certainly want to be supportive of 4-H and rodeo and all of those who have good animal welfare practices, both on site and when they travel with their animals.
I think, it's worth saying again, this is not directed at the rodeo, the fairgrounds, or excuse me, the fair board, the fair FFA, any of those things, 4-H. This is really just directed at all of the other shows that might want to come through Benton County. I think it's worth noting too, the rodeos do not use wild and exotic animals. Horses are not considered wild and exotic animals, livestock. So those things are not impacted by this.
All right. Are we ready for a motion?
I think there's a motion on the floor. I think we're ready for a vote.
So it's a vote on the amendment to the motion, correct?
It's a vote for the amended ordinance as further amended.
Okay.
In our discussion today.
Thank you for clarifying.
Needs a second.
I did second for purposes of discussion, which we just did.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of enacting ordinance number 2023-0321 as amended, say aye.
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 Motion carries. And, thank you for your efforts. And like has been mentioned, this is a work in progress. And we want to make sure that what we have enacted works as intended.
And Chair, I need to have the conduct the first reading of this ordinance. Before the Board of Commissioners for the State of Oregon, for the County of Benton, in the matter of amending Benton County Code Chapter 9, ordinance number 2023-0321. Benton County Board of Commissioners hereby ordains as follows. Short title, this ordinance shall be known as Amendment to Benton County Code Chapter 9. This will come back in weeks, which would be November 7th under old business. It is not a public hearing for the second reading. And then following the second reading, this will become effective 30 days thereafter, which will be December 8th.
Great. Thank you. Next is another budget note, community health centers, financial viability. Lacey and Rick.
Okay, thanks again, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, again, back to talk second budget note that you adopted in May, and with me is Lacey Malel, interim executive director for the CHC. Oh, sorry. With me is Lacey Malel, the interim executive director for the CHC. So happy that she's able to join me here this afternoon, or I should say late morning, to provide this update. So I have a presentation. Looks like it's in the process of coming up. So I'll just go ahead and get started. This is very similar to the last presentation we did on the external fleet, but now we're focused on the community health centers. And I like to say centers because we're talking both Lynn and Benton, as we often know it as Fund 521 and 522 around the office. But this is to, again, come back. As you recall, during the budget hearing, there was discussion about a lot of additional things we were going to have to put in place for this biennium to get us to a balanced budget. So we're here to report out on that and give you some ideas about what we see going forward. So here in the first slide was, again, just a quick overview of what was in the budget note. But before we go there, we're gonna go back in time here a little bit. These are exact slides that we provided you in May. And it starts with essentially what we saw in January of 2023. You might recall when we were doing some forecasting, my staff was working on a lot of the revenue estimates. Ahmed Zabari, who's also here today, my health finance officer, had done a lot of the revenue estimates. Of course, we were going through our new budget process of expenditure projections and getting to current service level, but this was essentially disclosing at the time a concern of what was about a $12.2 million deficit. And when you add a contingency, which we all need for our budgets, we were looking at about a $13.4 million deficit. So that's kind of where things started last January. And then we spent a lot of time in conversations with the previous executive director, Carla Jones, around some of these estimates, and particularly around the revenue. The expense-wise, there were clearly some things we thought we could do to minimize some of that impact. One of those, as you're all familiar with, was the application vacancy factor. You can see there was a relatively large vacancy factor that was put into the CHC, which is proving true. They have had quite a bit of vacancies within the CHC and behavioral health that is part of the CHC. So that is materializing. And you might also recall that we eliminated some positions in the budget. So those were pretty straightforward, in total, roughly around $6.5 million to kind of help offset that projection. I think the more challenging piece was the revenue. And again, from May, you can see here, this was a breakdown to try and describe the revenue strategies that we were going to take on. And you can see it was accumulating about $6.1 million of additional revenue above and beyond what our basic trend analysis was forecasting. I'm not going to go through all these bullets because you've heard them before, but just to kind of highlight, a couple. One that we talked a lot about was panel increases. I think it was reported that we were roughly 6 to 8 patients per day. I'm probably not saying that the right way, but but we also know that we obviously see in the private sector a lot higher numbers that, but they were very profit motivated. But even in our other community health centers, I think we use Lincoln County as a comparable. I think they were reporting somewhere to 14 to 16. So we do know there is opportunity for improvement. But as Lacey always likes to remind me, that obviously takes time. It takes a change of culture. It takes gradual movement, and we needed this to happen now. And so clearly that was an area that again is just going to have to trend over time. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these because Carla had provided a lot of the different types of things that we were trying to put in place, and Lacey can speak to any of the areas that she's seen in terms of implementing those. But in summary, after we had done that to sort of balance that $13.4 million deficit, you can see where it all came from. So again, there was expenditures that we put in place in terms of reductions in the budget. We had the whole recalibration, and then we had some policy option packages that also offset that. So in total, we were able to present to you a balanced budget, which we're required to by Oregon law. But we also said, and you clearly heard me say, that there was some concerns about that, and it was very aggressive, and we needed to be really in close contact with you. So one of the things I just, really want to take a moment to compliment Lacey and Carla before her and all the staff on taking some actions above and beyond. I mean, so we knew obviously this was aggressive. So some of the actions they've taken outside of the budget that weren't included, first and foremost is I think there was a lot of work in reframing some of our professional service contracts. You may hear of locums, which is a contracted service. They did do a great job of eliminating a lot of those contract services. So we are seeing some impacts in relation, which I'll show you here shortly. Administrative restrictions, I know that they have put those in place in terms of being much more thoughtful about the costs related to travel for training and other materials and supplies. We all know that there is a temporary closure of ALC Clinic. While it's not a huge budget, it is savings that we are incurring that was not anticipated in the budget. I know that there's a lot of work going on to streamline processes, to look at how we do things better. I know Lacey's mentioned on many occasions to me, like family planning is a good example where if we do have vacancies, are we reevaluating our current staff and the services, and can I integrate more into what we're doing? So I know that there's a lot of work being put towards that. Consistently reviewing all of the hiring, and they've held the line pretty well in terms of, again, they probably would like to hire maybe more staff, but they also have to be very thoughtful of the bottom line. So they're holding back on some of the vacancies. And then one that you're all very familiar with is the suspension of the drug court program, because that does have an impact. As you recall, that was a set as a full program for this binding. When we adopted the budget, we have since suspended that program. And so there are some clearly cost reductions, but a lot of those costs have been sort of spread out because you can build them in other areas. So again, a lot of work and effort has been put forth there. So what's it all mean? And again, when you look at from a actual standpoint, we started with a $69.5 million budget. That's what was adopted. That's the expenditures essentially. With the work that's been done that I just previously mentioned, we're estimating right now, and again, it's only 3 months worth of data. So again, there's still always risk in our estimates, but best information we can kind of forecast at this point is about a $60.9 million budget. So that's about 8.6% less than what was adopted from an expenditure. That's good. It's 12.4% less than what was adopted. One thing I want to note on there, because I know big numbers sometimes catch people's eyes, that 35% for Lynn County. The reason that is such a large is that because we were anticipating all these additional revenues that were coming in. So for Lynn County, the way it works is any additional fund balance can be transferred to Benton County. That covers most of the administrative costs. But if there's no revenues, then there won't be no transfer. And so essentially that gets backed out. So I just wanted to point that out. You're saying, wow, you really cut 35% off the budget for Lynn County. That's more of just saying that that's a transfer that we can't make to Benton County is one piece, but there are also some efficiencies they've achieved. So, my message is, 12, again, the CHC has done a great job of trying to go above and beyond the budget to operate within the revenues. That brings me to the next page though. So there's the expenses and then there is the revenues. And so again, just as a reminder, when we balanced this budget, the 69.5, we balanced it with a beginning balance of 2.4 million that's what we were anticipating going into this biennium, and then earned revenues of 67.1. We also built in a contingency, which again, good business. We want to have an ending balance. So that's also part of the way we do the budget, is part of the actual expenses. So, but then the reality is that first of all, our beginning balance, while we were pleased, the beginning balance, I was also very worried about the ending balance and the beginning balance for this biennium. 1.9 is where we're at. But as of September 30th, our earned revenue is 51.5. So again, you can 51.5 versus 67.1. That clearly isn't what we were forecasting. And so when you put all this together, what it means is we're missing our projection by about 23%. So expenses are down 12%, revenues are down further, which leaves us with a gap of about 12.3. Now, I could put a number to that, but I'm sure you can kind of look at it and get an idea that this is a pretty large amount of dollars. This is a pretty sufficient, pretty I'll just say a relatively large number. So I think, again, couple things. One, this is 3 months worth of data. It's all actuals, it's real information, and we, like we talked about in the previous presentation, we trend that forward. It's making assumptions that things don't change, and we do think, things can change. We do think there are efforts that are going to go forward that may increase our revenues, that further reduce our expense. It creates more efficiencies. But again, 3 months of data, this is the best that we can get to. But I also know that, and this is what I had, mentioned back in January, we need to start now to be able to start putting things in place. We can't wait for revenues to produce. I do think that we'll make efforts. We need to essentially, what I want to say in my state terms, we need to reshoot this budget. We need to basically do a rebalance and come before you in January and give you a new budget that is more realistic to what we're forecasting and what we think. Again, that means Lacey, myself, Ahmed, Chris Campbell, who's behind me, all of us are going to have to work in tandem over here the next 2 to 3 months to really evaluate this closely. It's going to mean that we're going to obviously look clearly at some of our revenue projections and probably give you a more realistic revenue forecasting. There are some good things happening. We're in the process of trying to renegotiate rates, which haven't been negotiated since 2002. So there are opportunities here for increases. But again, that's not going to happen instantly. That's probably a year away before those type of things start to kick in. But again, we can do some conservative forecasting around those type of things. I think there's a lot of evaluation that we need to do on LC. I know is still a conversation that needs to be had. What is going to be the future there? Again, that's not huge amounts of budget, but certainly it's part of the conversation. I think that in addition, like I said, if we wait 3 months, we'll have better data at December 31st to say, okay, are we still trending the same way? Perhaps it's a little bit better. Maybe things look more optimistic at that point, and we can get a better feel for what needs to be implemented. One thing I really want to be clear on this, because I think it's often said that, this is the CHC problem. This is a county problem. We are a collective county. The CHC is part of county government, is part of our budget. And so when we start looking at these things, we also have to look at our administrative cost to this too. The CHC plays a large portion of the central cost allocation. We have never had to cross this before. This is new territory where we're in the middle of a binding. We're saying that we may have to look at some cutbacks. And that just doesn't mean just the CHC. That may mean the indirect support that we provide as well. Traditionally, how our system works here is that it's a fixed amount. It's not a percentage that I'm more accustomed to, where as direct costs change, so does the indirect. We actually have a fixed set. So that's another conversation that needs to be part of this. So overall, we would recommend as a next step is coming back to you similar to my previous recommendation at your January goal setting with a more comprehensive recommendation on what we need to do. And like I said, that's going to be a combination of potential more realistic revenue projections, but it's likely going to be some tough choices to put in front of you as well in terms of perhaps services that we do differently, perhaps not do at all. And then it's also a question for you as commissioners is how much do you subsidize? Same as the last question that I posed to you. So again, I'm not asking, for any, decisions in relation to this or direction, because we need to provide you more information. But we want to be realistic and transparent to you on kind of where things are at. So with that, I will conclude and turn it over to my colleague if she has anything she'd like to add.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I really just want to start by thanking Rick and Ahmed and his team. And I'm also grateful, Rachel, that you're here. So now we can kind of lend Rick back to our services. And then also Commissioner Ojero, who's just been really supportive of us and has been a great liaison to the CHC board as well. I want to say, I think the CHC board would also appreciate some of the things that you just stated out loud as well, just understanding that we do bear a pretty heavy burden with the kind of indirect costs. And while we make a lot of efforts at cost containment and even revenue generation, it becomes almost prohibitive of us to really make a dent sometimes in some of these conversations. So, I could go on and we could talk about the new revenue maybe more calibrated things that make a little bit more sense that we can look at. But I don't think that that's necessary for this conversation. But I can tell you that, I really have been having a great time, a really good working relationship with April and the health department. We're working really hard at trying to work together to solve our collective issues that we're facing and being really creative in terms of who provides services, how we fund services, how we can look at things differently. And then moreover than that is really communicating the cultural expectations to our staff that we're all working together, be it through the behavioral health department, the public health department, or through our health centers. So I don't think I have anything else to add to that if you guys don't have any questions.
I have one question. And that was raised by the discussion that is in the packet, or the background information that is in the packet. And that is, Rick, you mentioned the beginning balance. But as I understand it from the information we have before us, that about $1 million of that is still the money from House Bill 4004. That is designated for workforce incentive payments for behavioral health. So it's not, it's restricted money. And we do also have timelines that we have to spend that out. So we can't continue to carry that on our balance sheet in order to make the numbers look better, because there is an intended purpose for that as well.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Ojero. To get sort of down a little bit granular, to give you more precise, when you look at the beginning balance of that 1.9, 1.3 is specifically to the behavioral health component of the clinic, which is $1 million of that, and 300,000 is specific to the Lynn County Clinic. There was no ending balance or beginning balance for the Benton side. And then the balance, which is approximately 600,000, is what we have left, what you're referring to, which is the House Bill 4004. I hope I got that right, which is specifically to the workforce expansion and additional dollars. And you're right, that's dedicated money. I hope that helps, but that's good clarification. But in essence, 1.3 million is what was beginning balance for the clinics in whole.
I'm not sure we can do it today, and I don't have a slide number. I just have page 145 in our packet. The rebalance plan, 13,400,000. How does that fit in with 2 pages later, budget reshoot based on actuals and estimated budget savings, 8.6 million?
Yeah. So basically, what the rebalance plan that I believe you're referring to, which is, I'm going to flip over there really quick. I think this is what you're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So basically those first two line items, those were embedded, those were actions taken to where we reduced expenditures in your adopted budget. So basically that's done. The other one was based on making more money. And so when we look at our analysis right now, what we're saying is that the CHC has taken steps so as to move forward in terms of those additional things. They've moved forward in terms of doing other things beyond just what we projected. And that's where a lot of the savings has come in. But the things that they're doing aren't enough to be able to offset what we're seeing is less revenue than we forecasted, which is that $6.1 million that you see. So again, kudos that we're doing all the right things to go be above and beyond the budget, which is the right things to do, but it's just still not enough, at least at this juncture. So we have to be able to reevaluate the revenue projections to give you more realistic. And we also have to determine, is that going to require more expenditure reductions beyond what they have already done? Hope that helps.
Yeah. And another number that has gotten my attention is the number of patients per day, 6 to 8. And I mean, visited a doctor on occasion. Not very often do I get an hour or more than an hour visit. So, I mean, that, and I'm not very familiar with what goes on, but just looking at the raw number, it just, that seems too low or leisurely. Or I'm not quite sure what the correct term is.
Doesn't help meet the need, the primary care need, both in Benton County nor in Lynn County where our clinics are located. So, and I mean, I would like to say publicly, there are providers that do see more than that, and that work really hard. So we're really looking closely at our providers that are meeting these higher metric goals and seeing what their practices are and being able to implement those across the board. So efforts are being made, but it is a bit of a cultural shift for our team.
Well, and I assume the need is out there.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's not just numbers, it's people needing to get medical help. And if we could see more people, it helps the financials, but it also helps our community. Okay. Any other questions? If not, look forward to coming back in 3 months and doing this again and hopefully have some progress on some of these challenges. And again, I appreciate getting more accurate information than we've had in the past so that we know what the real situation is and not just subsidizing something kind of unknowingly, but saying, okay, here's the expenses and here's the revenue and there's a gap, and is that coming out of county general fund, or what are our other options? But, I appreciate the effort to get us to this point.
Mr. Chairman, just in closing, I just want to again thank Lacey. She's been a top-notch professional on this and just jumped right in. I know she's had a lot going on, but her expertise and background has been very helpful moving this forward. And then also Chris Campbell, who is back here, as well as Ahmed Zabari. I just want to recognize them. This is a lot of work that goes into this. And you're right, we need to be more transparent. We need to dive into this a little bit more. We're getting better. We're not all the way there yet. We know that there's efficiencies that we can improve, but again, just want to compliment the people behind us who do a lot of the hard work that we get to sit up here and talk about. So.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask an unrelated question? I'm just curious, do we have a timeline on when our third budget note will be brought to us that had to do with the sheriff's office management salary compensation? I think it was based on our current, on HR's compensation study. I just hadn't heard if we are making progress with that or not.
I might be able to answer some of that question. Is we're not completed with the salary study for management. So, once that is prepared, I know our HR director is anxious for it as well. Then we can, of course, address the issues that the sheriff's having right now as well.
Thank you.
We need a break for the homeless. 5 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, we'll take a short break. Welcome back. Next up, 8.4, Coordinated Homeless Response, HOPE bylaws, MOU, IGA, proposed amendments. April Holland and Rebecca Taylor. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be back with you here today. When we last met on this topic, we identified a need to update the foundational documents pertaining to our homeless response initiatives. Thank you for directing staff to move ahead in this work. I want to thank and acknowledge the thoughtful, intentional, and collaborative work of Rebecca Taylor in this. This update and conversation centers around amendments to the HOPE Advisory Board bylaws specifically. While we intend to update both the MOU and the IGA, additional time with community partners is really required to accomplish these adjustments. We rightly center our community in these efforts, and we plan to return to you next month with proposed edits to these other foundational pieces. So today's conversation will focus on those bylaws. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca.
Turn this on. All right. Thank you. I got one thing right this morning. All right. Okay. So as stated in the staff report that was submitted with the draft amendments to the bylaws, there really are specific objectives that we are attempting to accomplish with these amendments. As April said, is the being able to clarify these foundational documents are really for the purposes of making sure that we're moving in a strategic way with the House Bill 4123 implementation for a coordinated homeless response system. So specifically, as we were reviewing the development of the strategic plan, which is one thing that we will continue to come back and give you updates on, we noted that there was an opportunity to clarify the roles of the HOPE Advisory Board along with the Executive Committee with the requirements of House Bill 4123, specifically around the roles of the office and the policy functions of the House Bill 4123 requirements and the work that our community had been doing for a long period of time. So in that, we were looking at ways to make clear distinctions between operational and policy functions within the system. And this really is because we have gained a lot more resources in our department on staff levels, and then also with partnerships with our community agencies and organizations to really clarify where these different functions can be accomplished. And as stated, formalizing the requirements of House Bill 4123 was important, and making acknowledgement of that in the HOPE bylaws themselves, specifically the advisory board as it's defined in House Bill 4123. I can appreciate potentially the confusion that might arise as we talk about advisory boards and executive committee, because there are different phrases in each of the different requirements and also our existing governing functions. So again, that's another purpose of amending these bylaws to make sure that there's clarity to our community partners and within our own operations of the functions of each of these. Another really important thing we wanted to accomplish with these amendments is defining the role of the HOPE Advisory Board. This is a very a huge resource for our community, the HOPE Advisory Board, with the expertise and experiences and voices that come to that table. And so really making sure that we understand both as staff internally in the county and for our community, how we can continue to access and use this resource of the Hope Advisory Board to inform our work as we respond to homelessness moving forward. Also, a really important element of all this is, as we know, that homelessness can be a very complex and sometimes intimidating thing to try to navigate. And so as part of a steward in our community around this topic, where can we create clarity and transparency for our community by making sure that our community partners and the community knows which different component of our homeless response system does what. And so making sure we clarify that. And that's another function of these amendments to the bylaws. So going through, there were very specific amendments that were addressed. And so in the beginning, really just clarifying both the fact that we are integrating not just the IGA between the city of Corvallis and Benton County for funding partnership to support the staffing of the Coordinated Homeless Response Office, but also the House Bill 4123 MOU that currently is between Benton County, the city of Corvallis, the city of Philomath, along with our partners at Community Service Consortium, that this really is also a foundational document, the MOU that is, that informs our partnership moving forward and also gives an ability for our partners through the MOU to have some planning oversight and policy oversight and amendments potential to the bylaws as well as chartering jurisdictions to these bylaws. We really wanted to maintain the vision. We did not at all alter the vision, as we feel both in the development of our strategic plan that these really are the core values and vision that have informed the strategic plan. And noting that while these are bylaws, this also is a visionary document that was drafted at a time where our community prioritized and still prioritizes this work. And so these values and vision are really what continues to guide our work. Moving on, where we find a lot of changes in the bylaws is around the structure and general representation to account for the fact where we are now positioning the executive committee through amendments to the bylaws and changes to the membership to meet the requirements of House Bill 4123. The function too, as we see that the chartering jurisdictions really are now also encompassing the members of the House Bill 4123 MOU. And then the executive committee really serves as that liaison function between the chartering jurisdictions, the Hope Advisory Board, and the Coordinated Homeless Response Office. Anything you'd like to rolling down this path? Okay. And so then looking at the advisory board as really Hope Advisory Board now. So executive committee, just so we clarify this collectively together, the executive committee will fulfill the requirements of the advisory board as required by House Bill 4123. The Hope Advisory Board will continue in that title and will accomplish the engagement, community engagement function of our Coordinated Homeless Response System. And the Coordinated Homeless Response Office is also acknowledged in the structure and representation within the bylaws to provide that staff support of the Hope Advisory Board and the Executive Committee and support the operational implementation of strategic priorities that are identified through the planning work of this system. Moving forward, we made some formatting adjustments to consolidate a lot of the information in this document to the specific component of the system where this information was most appropriate. Basic, not substantive changes, but mainly just organizational and ease of reading. So that's where we see a lot of lines crossed out in there. Membership of the executive committee. Again, some formatting changes there, and then also clarification of the membership requirements of the executive committee to capture the requirements of House Bill 4123, and then consolidation of that information down there. So that number 3 addresses that. Moving forward, the membership of the Hope Advisory Board, similarly changing some of the content under there for ease of reading and organization. and then also acknowledging the different ways in which the executive committee, as defined by House Bill 4123, will interact with the Hope Advisory Board to inform our systems work. And ensuring that we preserve the representation of the Hope Advisory Board as being that community engagement, and clearly having representation from all the agencies and partners that play a role in the system, along with those with lived experience and individuals who have historically faced significant barriers to housing in our community, to inform how we can move forward with work that reduces those barriers. We maintain the same language of representation, and compelled the executive committee to consider that representation throughout their appointing of members to the Hope Advisory Board. Again, just further clarification on page 7 of 12, general standard advisory board language as far as officers, meetings, and quorums. Just some organizational changes there. Moving forward, very similar changes, just as advisory board looking at example advisory boards throughout Benton County to capture the same formatting and organization for clarity. And then section E on page 9, this is where we wanted to clarify and make some distinctions between policy and operations. There was some really valuable information captured in these bylaws under this section that now, with the formation of the Coordinated Homeless Response Office with staffing within the county and their partnership with the City of Corvallis and Community Service Consortium, and the development of our strategic plan, we've acknowledged that these functions that you'll see 1 through 4 are more effectively accomplished with that operational implementation. And so we've removed that language with the intent to come back to you to show you how those things will be effectively accomplished through the other structures and the operational components of our Coordinated Homeless Response Office. However, we did not remove the intent of our advisory board responsibilities and authority from providing that policy feedback and recommendations to both the through the executive committee to the charting jurisdictions, and making sure that we have that communication loop between each of the components. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, section 5, which I've removed the numbering, but in some cases, as you can imagine, once you do a track changes document, sometimes it's hard to track what you're doing after a while, but we do plan to clean this up and make sure that the documentation we bring back will capture any recommendations you give to us today and be in a format that will be easy to read. So on page 11, you will see that it is under the section recommendation authority of advisory board, and that's slashed out. That should remain the same. But specifically, this was an important component where we talked about that communication loop between each component of the coordinated homeless response system, that decision-making journey of the recommendations that occur at the Hope Advisory Board, and also noting that there will be potential decisions that occur at the Executive Committee Board as well. Specifically, we wanted to make sure that we preserve the intent of the original language in the bylaws of that our community knows that when they come and they speak before these committees or advisory boards, that they understand where that information goes. In some cases, that type of information may be in the form of something that would require adoption, resolution, or approval. However, there are many times where that feedback and recommendation may not warrant that level of decision-making, and more as educational or informing on a staff level. So one specific thing which I did not include the amendments that I provided that I will say we are recommending today is the last sentence under that paragraph, where it reads, the executive committee shall forward its recommendations to the chartering jurisdictions. And then it goes on to say for final approval. We're proposing removing that language for final approval and maintaining the sentence in that they will forward the recommendations to the chartering jurisdictions. noting that we have included other communities beyond the city of Corvallis and Benton County. We acknowledge that there's going to be recommendations that occur at the Hope Advisory Board that may not be appropriate for all our charting jurisdictions. So by removing that language, we are still enabling. We're not saying that the charting jurisdictions don't have the ability to approve those or move forward with policies that are appropriate for their respective charting jurisdiction. We just don't want to have that compelled in bylaws and be a confusing statement for the partners and the individuals utilizing this system to provide those recommendations. And I believe just the final is conflict of interest, which is template language that I'm sure Vance should be comfortable with. Okay. All right. So that's kind of just the summary of edits. Going back, one of the things that really we are excited about this opportunity to clarify this language because we do feel we are moving forward with some structure around House Bill 4123. And each time we get further along, it's been an iterative process. It seems to be clear and clear the direction we go. So while this might seem a bit of a perfunctory task, this really serves as an opportunity to clarify amongst staff and with our community and as a county as a whole, really where we want to head with our coordinated homeless response system with House Bill 4123.
Becca, can you share next steps in terms of both these bylaws and conversations to come with partners on MOU and IGA?
Yes, and thank you. I need some cues sometimes. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've worked really closely with City of Corvallis as they have an IGA with Benton County that supports the funding of the Coordinated Homeless Response Office. And so we've provided them with all the documentation that we've provided you here today. They will be providing a city manager update to their city council meeting. I believe that's on November 6th. And so that will get their council familiar with this moving forward. And then what we had planned next is to either return on the 14th or the 28th after they've had an opportunity to update their board or council regarding these changes, and after we've been able to attend the Hope Advisory Board, which is tomorrow, to update them on these changes as well. Just as not a side note, but just to let you know, we did meet with the executive committee as it currently is functioning and advise them that these changes are happening and they are supportive of those changes. We also were able to talk with the city of Philomath and make them aware that these changes are happening and that we would keep them up to date. So by returning either the November 14th or 28th with changes both that acknowledge anything we hear back from feedback from our partners in the Hope Advisory Board and anything we hear here today, then we would be able to come back potentially with those IGAs and MOU language that would be fitting the changes that are seen here today.
Thank you. That's all very helpful. I think that this does the job of meshing the House Bill 4123 and our existing structure as we needed to do. And I'm glad to see it so that it's more streamlined and not too cumbersome and bureaucracy heavy, because we don't need that. We need the action, right? So I'm grateful for that. I have one question about the title of that section E that is so critical, advisory board responsibilities. It says advisory board responsibilities authority. Maybe there should be an and in there. I don't.
Yeah.
And I had a question about the terms of office for the advisory board members. Most of our advisory board members, I believe, serve 3-year terms, and this is 2-year terms. So I was wondering if there was a particular reason for that. I know that the 3-year terms often allow for better staggering of membership. So that was just another small question. And I know that the membership has transitioned gradually over time in a very natural basis. So I think that whatever is in there will just be a guidepost anyway.
Thank you. Yes, no changes were made to the original bylaw language regarding duration of membership.
Okay.
So I do think that is a point where we didn't want to jump into that yet until we had an opportunity to talk with our other partners, especially City of Corvallis and Philomath, as far as the executive committee, to understanding that there is going to be a commitment to appointing somebody to the executive committee. So I think making sure that we're in line with any legal obligations that we have, but also acknowledging the capacity of our partners in this.
Yeah, yeah. And for the executive committee, it might not have to be the same terms as for the advisory board. But I guess going back to the formation of these bylaws, I always wondered why we didn't just make it 3 years, because the rest of our advisory committees use that term. I don't know. So it's just a small question.
Yeah, an interesting holdover from the original bylaws. Well, we can definitely include that into our conversations.
Yeah, and it may well be that it was taken from the Multnomah County bylaws that we originally used as a template. I do not know. And the appointment authority for the advisory board will remain with the executive committee then. That's the way it is now, and it'll remain that way. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I captured those notes.
Well, I appreciate the effort, and it's always a challenge to align what we do with our bylaw structure, and so appreciate the effort to try to update the bylaws. I don't think I have anything else. Okay.
Looks good to me. Thank you.
And as we're getting closer to a motion, is it correct? We're not dealing with the IGA and MOU at this time.
That's correct. Not today. We'll be engaging with partners and come back to this body in about a month with all together.
And we're not, I was a little confused. It sounds like you don't want action on the bylaws today either, because they still need to go before the City Council of Corvallis and before the Hope Advisory Board. Or do you want action on the bylaws today?
No necessarily formal action, but we did want to capture any concerns regarding the content in here, and we can share that with our partners. And I think you've elevated the items you had concerns about. Okay.
So we're just saying good job.
Continue on.
Yeah, that's why I could have just.
I'll come back.
I guess there was one point I did want to ask is November 14th, I believe, is a work session, whereas November 28th is a standard board meeting. If we do return with a request for action, we are just seeking feedback if there is a preference from the board as to whether a formal action carried out in this as IGAs or MOUs needs to occur in one or the other of those meetings.
And the meeting for the week of November 13th will be on the 13th rather than the 14th, just so you know. And that's, as you say, it's a goal-setting meeting. I don't, that's a decision up to the chair and county administrator.
If there's a concern about timeliness, we can handle that on the 13th.
Okay.
It is goal setting, but when we need to take care of business, we can do that.
All right.
So if you're ready, on the 13th, get in line.
All right. Will do. Yeah, we've have a few dates set up with the City of Corvallis that are kind of dependent on whether we go the 13th or the 28th. So
Okay.
I appreciate that feedback.
That's our job, to keep things moving. Okay. Anything else? Well, thank you, and we'll probably see you November 13th. And at that time, we will do the bylaws and the IGA and MOU as a package. Okay, great, thank you. Next up, number 9, information sharing. Have things to share at this point. And sharing is good. Isn't that what it's-
Anyone have some lunch they want to share with me or just kidding?
Main item of sharing today, food. Um,
I have one little thing, which is
Go
just
for
that
it.
I was asked to do a panel, sit on a panel for the AOC conference for land use. And I said, yes.
Excellent. I will be moderating a panel on House Bill 4123 process. So that's my contribution. I'm also quite engaged in the series of Health and Human Services workshop meetings that are occurring at the Association of Oregon Counties on hot topics for health and human services, and also on a joint public safety and health and human services meeting on Measure 110. So I'm going to be in and out of Salem a fair bit over the next couple of weeks for those meetings.
I see the notices for the HHS meetings. There've been a couple already. What's the plan?
There's been one meeting so far, and it was, and it's open to all commissioners. There's no, it's not just Health and Human Services folks that have been in attendance. The focus on the first one was basically to get the issues out on the table, what was on top of mind. And at that first meeting, Measure 110 was overwhelmingly on top of mind. And so we've carved out some space intentionally for the public safety and health and human services to meet jointly on that, because the groups that attend each of those different steering committee meetings tend to have different perspectives on the current measure and on the changes that are needed to that measure. So the intent right now at AOC is to use that joint meeting on Measure 110 to come to at least a mutual understanding of how the current measure and proposed changes to it would land in different counties and what different counties want to see, and to encourage counties to take their own legislative approaches to that changes to Measure 110, because it is likely to be really divisive within the body. The other meeting series on health and human services will focus more on all of the other issues that are related to behavioral health and the intersection with the justice system, but focus more on the specific legislative changes that are needed or funding that's needed to fully fund our behavioral health system, to fund crisis respite centers around the state, to have residential treatment facilities, to contemplate civil commitment law changes to address some of the other challenges with the state hospital and the aid and assist program. And let's see, I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple of other things that came up in that context that were top of people's minds, but that's a lot of what we were addressing in that meeting. So we're going to have a second meeting there and inviting a couple of counties to present about best practices in some of these areas and about policy solutions that are being explored for the short session. No, I'm take that back, not for the short session. That series of health and human services meetings is really to queue up legislation for the 25 long session, whereas the Measure 110 meeting is really focused on the short session.
Well, I appreciate it. I saw the notice for the HHS meeting and glad that you're participating.
Yep. And I also had the good fortune to participate as an appointed member for the Criminal Justice Council on their Justice Reinvestment Grant Review Committee. That was a very interesting process. I had the opportunity to read the proposals from all the counties that participate in that program as to how they're using those state reinvestment dollars in their law enforcement and community corrections and behavioral health programs to reduce recidivism and to reintegrate folks into the community. And that gave me quite a few ideas. And so it was, and made some useful contacts. And then the only other thing that I'm doing, I think I've already mentioned to you all, there's a youth behavioral health summit coming up in a couple weeks down in Eugene, hosted by Rep. Conrad, and I will be attending that on our behalf. Oh, and the other thing I would like to mention that's also related is that last week, Corvallis Police Department and Benton County and with the support of IHNCCO, kicked off the situation table training. It was a 2-day training that involved somewhere between 40 and 50 people from the community, various organizations, government and non-governmental. And I'm very excited about that starting up. There will be a formal situation table, which is a triage a place for folks to bring anonymous cases to that group of stakeholders around the table to address problem solving for folks that are at very high risk of becoming either justice involved or involved in crisis behavioral health or emergency room services. And the idea is to intervene early, to keep those folks from becoming involved with the legal system and to address their needs before they're in total crisis. So that is something that was recommended from the Hope Advisory Board and has been a dream ever since we conducted the criminal justice systems assessment. And I'm thrilled that the Corvallis Police Department is providing support and that the core team, the joint initiative of the health department and the police, Corvallis Police, will be supporting that situation table operation.
All right. Impressive list. Couple things. Last Thursday, the 19th, at 10:19 or something like that, we had the shakeout drill, and as a longtime volunteer firefighter, there is no substitute for training practice. So I appreciate the organization that it takes to do drills like this, and Rick Paisley did a nice job of keeping us informed. Over the weekend, I was in Sun River at every 2-year Democratic Summit, and great opportunity. Kudos to Senator Merkley, who spent all evening Friday and all day Saturday basically being available, going to various events and seminars, and I know how precious his time is, and he spent considerable amount of time just being available, and was the speaker at the Saturday evening banquet. And so that was a nice opportunity. And as you mentioned, Zan, a lot of talk about preparing for the short session, which is coming right up in February, and you need to be prepared ahead of time, or it'll be over in the blink of an eye. And generally, the legislators try to do more than will actually fit in 28-day session, or may not be quite the right number, but it's short. Benton County is gearing up to see if we can get help for our behavioral health efforts in the short session. And so conversations have already begun on that. Also, for probably larger efforts, the 25 session is preparation for that. I have been at some transportation meetings, and we had a significant transportation funding package in 2017, 5.3 billion, and that wasn't enough with escalating costs to do everything that was proposed, and so I think there's going to be a significant another transportation package being developed. We have some very large projects. The new bridge across the Columbia River connecting Portland and Vancouver, Washington, which is I think in the $6 billion range at this point. How to pay for it, and tolling on very busy roads, I-5, that new bridge, 205, but tolling isn't very popular. And if you put a toll on a freeway, what does that do to, well, I don't want to pay that. I'm going to go around on city streets and or county roads. And so, but the general situation is ODOT is, especially on maintenance projects, doesn't have the funding to do what they need to do, want to do. So that'll be an interesting discussion. I think that's what I have. Anything? Okay. Share lunch with us?
I do want to mention just a couple of other things. Last week, I had the pleasure of speaking to the Lynn Benton Housing Authority Board. They were having a work session, kind of a retreat and training for new board members. And so I was one of the people that was invited to speak to what was going on the Benton side with respect to housing. And from the Lynn County side, they had invited one of their community development specialists from Albany, who's been working very hard on affordable housing. And it was an opportunity to, again, build some more linkages between what's going on with our executive order work, you know, the 5019 funding and the Housing Authority, where we're exploring a different approach to rapid rehousing for community members and to reach our target of 31 people or households rehoused by January of 2025. So it was a very good discussion. I think that the folks there are very understanding of the need for more case management and navigation for folks, because it's so hard to rehouse people from being chronically unhoused, as is, and it's that population that we're supposed to address under 5019 into housing. That's not an easy change for people to make. So that hopefully will be a fruitful partnership with the Lynn Benton Housing Authority moving forward. And I'm really excited about it because that has been, I would say, one of the spots where we haven't had as much of a collaboration so far with respect to our housing and homelessness efforts. And then the other was that both Rachel and Rick and I all had an opportunity to do a ride along with Dial-A-Bus. And it was an interesting couple of hours focused on not the services that they contract with us for as Benton area transit so much, but really focused on what Dial-A-Bus as a 501c3 does and has historically done in the community to support adults and youth with disabilities to get to jobs, family gatherings, cultural events, et cetera. And they really do and have historically gone above and beyond to try to provide transportation connectivity for those really vulnerable people in the county. And that is not covered by our contracts. And so part of what I think we're trying to do is figure out how as a county and they as a nonprofit can continue to provide some of that above and beyond service, which allows people to be truly engaged in the community rather than living in an institutional life without it being part of the kind of transit contract that we currently have them in when it comes to service. So I'm hoping that we can engage perhaps our developmental diversity office and maybe some more of the health department and the Council of Governments Aging Disability Services in a conversation to think about what that part of dial-a-bus service looks like outside of the transit contract.
Well, that reminds me, I got to talk to Senator Gelser Bluin at the summit. She was on the dial-a-bus ride, and her son Sam regularly uses that service. So it was nice to get a report from her, just her take on how the service is performing. It's another Representative Rayfield, Speaker of the House, had a fairly prominent role. He got to address the group at Sunday morning breakfast with his Senate counterpart, Rob Wagner, going over what the legislature accomplished and what's on tap for the short session, and also looking forward to 2025. So it was nice to see our local representative prominently featured for the statewide gathering of Democrats. Oh, the other thing at the summit that was very worthwhile, fifth CD forum. The fifth is north and east of us. It goes from Lynn Marion, Clackamas over to Deschutes. And so there was 3 candidates that are going to be running in May's primary: Janelle Bynum, Jamie McLeod Skinner, and Lynn Peterson. So it was nice to see really high quality candidates and what they had to say about their plans for being our member of Congress from the 5th Congressional District. And it's nice that we really do have good choices there. So if there's nothing else, I will find my hammer. Meeting adjourned.